The first thing Rowan Hale noticed when he woke up was the silence. Not peaceful, not calm. The kind of silence that pressed against your eardrums like thumbs. The kind that meant something had gone catastrophically wrong. He tried to move and couldn't. Tried to breathe deep and felt his ribs scream in protest. Somewhere above him, or maybe below, he couldn't tell anymore. Timber groaned like a dying animal. He was buried. The realization came slow, filtered through layers of shock and cold that had already started eating into his bones. He couldn't see anything, couldn't feel his left leg. His right arm was pinned beneath something that might have been a roof beam, or might have been part of the ridge itself, collapsed into splinters and ice. How long? The question floated through his mind without urgency. Time felt negotiable down here in the dark. Could have been minutes, could have been hours. The avalanche had come out of nowhere, he remembered that much. One second he'd been checking the northern stakes of his claim, the next the entire world had tilted sideways and swallowed him whole. Nobody knew he was out here. Nobody would come looking. Rowan closed his eyes, not that it made a difference, and tried to remember why that seemed like such a good idea 6 months ago. Isolation. Independence. The kind of solitude that let a man forget the things he needed to forget. Yeah, that had worked out great. His breath came shallow now, frost forming on his lips. The cold was almost gentle about it, the way it crept in. Like falling asleep. Like giving up. He was still thinking about how easy that would be when he heard it. Scraping. Distant at first, then closer. The groan of timber being moved, then a voice, rough, furious, absolutely not giving up. I know you're under here, you stupid bastard. I saw the slide take you. Rowan tried to respond and managed something between a cough and a wheeze. There, I heard that. Don't you dare die on me now. The scraping intensified. More timber shifted. A crack of light appeared above him, gray, cloud-filtered, but light nonetheless. Then a hand, calloused and strong, grabbed his collar and pulled. Move! Come on! I can't do this part for you. He tried. His body didn't cooperate. The hand disappeared for a moment, then came back with a length of rope that got looped under his arms with practiced efficiency. This is gonna hurt, the voice said. Good. Means you're still alive. Then she pulled. Rowan had thought he knew pain. Turned out he'd only been acquainted with it before. Now they were intimate. His ribs, his leg, his arm, everything that was broken announced itself as she hauled him up through the wreckage, timber scraping his back, ice cutting his face. He heard himself making sounds he wasn't proud of. Then suddenly, air. Real air, cold enough to sear his lungs, and he was on his back in the snow, staring up at gray sky and the face of a woman he'd never seen before. She wasn't beautiful. That was his first coherent thought, which was insane given the circumstances. But there it was, strong-featured, with a jaw that looked like it had been carved with a dull axe, and eyes that were doing a very good impression of being unimpressed with his existence. Dark hair pulled back in a braid that had come half undone during whatever insanity had possessed her to dig him out. Broad shoulders, hands that looked like they could break rocks. You're welcome, she said. Rowan tried to answer and coughed up something red instead. Fantastic. She didn't sound surprised. She knelt beside him, hands already moving with the kind of competence that spoke to experience with disasters. Broken ribs. Probably a punctured lung from the sound of that. Your leg's a mess. We need to move. Can't, he managed. Wasn't asking. She already had the rope tied to something. He craned his neck and saw a sled, rough built but sturdy. I didn't dig you out just to watch you freeze. You're coming with me. Don't know you. Mara Voss, there. Now you do. She grabbed him under the arms again. This is going to hurt worse than the first part. She wasn't lying. The next hour existed in fragments. Pain, movement, the scrape of the sled over ice. At some point he must have passed out because when awareness came back they were moving through trees, and the light had changed. Mara was ahead of him, hauling the sled with a rope over her shoulder, breath coming in steady clouds. Why? His voice came out barely above a whisper. She didn't slow down. Why what? Why dig me out? She was quiet for so long he thought she wasn't going to answer. Then, saw the slide. Saw it take you. Nobody else was going to check. Could have left me. Could have. She pulled harder, the sled skidding over a rough patch. Didn't. That seemed to be the end of the conversation. Rowan let his head fall back and watched the sky disappear behind pine branches. Every breath felt like someone was driving nails through his chest. His leg had gone from screaming to a dull, distant throb that was somehow worse. He should have died under that ridge. Should be dead right now. Instead, he was being hauled through the woods by a woman who'd apparently decided his survival was her problem. He didn't know whether to be grateful or resentful. The cabin appeared without warning, or maybe he'd blacked out again. Small, rough-built, tucked into the trees like it was trying to hide from the world. Mara pulled the sled right up to the door and disappeared inside. Came back with a board and more rope. "I'm going to move you," she said. "Bite down on this." She shoved a leather strap into his mouth. Then she grabbed his leg. Rowan bit down hard enough to taste blood and saw stars. Actual stars, bright against the gray of unconsciousness pressing in. When the world came back, she had him splinted and was already working on getting him inside. The cabin's interior was warm, relative term, but after the ice it felt like a furnace. Single room. Stone fireplace with actual fire going. Bed in one corner, table and chairs that looked handmade. Shelves stocked with supplies that suggested someone who knew how to survive winter up here. Mara got him onto the bed with less ceremony than kindness, though she was careful about his leg. "Water," she said, shoving a cup at him. "Drink." He tried. His hands shook too badly. She steadied the cup with an expression that suggested she was reconsidering the whole rescue decision. "I'm going to check your ribs. Don't move." Her hands were cold but efficient as she peeled back what was left of his coat and shirt. He felt her fingers probe his side and couldn't stop the grunt of pain. 3 broken, maybe 4. She sat back. Lungs compromised, but not collapsed. Yet. "You're lucky." "Don't feel lucky." "You're breathing. That's lucky." She stood, moved to the fireplace, came back with a bottle and cloth. "This is going to hurt." The pattern of the day, apparently. She cleaned the worst of the cuts on his face and hands with something that smelled like paint thinner and felt like liquid fire. Rowan gritted his teeth and took it. "Who are you?" he asked when she was done. Mara wiped her hands on the cloth. "Told you. Mara Voss." "That's a name, not an answer." "It's the answer you're getting." She moved back to the fire, grabbed a pot hanging over it. Whatever was inside smelled like meat and herbs and made his stomach remember it existed. "You were on the northern ridge. That's private property." "My property?" Her expression flickered, surprised maybe. "You're Hale." "Rowan Hale." "Yeah." He tried to sit up, thought better of it when his ribs reminded him why that was a terrible idea. "You know me?" "Know of you." "Hermit who bought the old Cartwright claim 6 months ago. Paid cash. Nobody's seen you since." She ladled something into a bowl. "People assumed you were dead or crazy." "Could be both." "Could be." She brought the bowl over. "Eat. Slowly. Your stomach's going to hate you, but you need it." The stew, if you could call it that, was gamey and oversalted and absolutely the best thing Rowan had ever tasted. He managed 3 spoonfuls before his body decided that was enough and threatened to send it all back up. Mara took the bowl without comment. "Rest. We'll try again later." "How long was I under there?" "Don't know. Found you maybe 2 hours after the slide." She set the bowl aside. "You would have been dead in another hour. 2 at most." 2 hours. He'd been buried for who knew how long, and she'd spent 2 hours digging him out. Alone. In unstable wreckage that could have come down on her any second. "You're insane," he said. "Probably." She didn't sound offended. "Sleep. I'll wake you every few hours to make sure you haven't stopped breathing." "Comforting?" "Wasn't trying to comfort you." But her expression softened, just a fraction. "You're alive. That's what matters right now." She turned away, started cleaning up. Rowan watched her move around the cabin with the kind of efficiency that came from doing everything alone for a long time. Strong, capable, and apparently willing to risk her life for a stranger. "Why?" he asked again. Mara stopped, looked back at him. "Why what?" "Why risk it? You don't know me. Could have left me. Nobody would have known." She was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I would have known." That was apparently the end of it. She went back to whatever she was doing, and Rowan let his eyes close. Every part of him hurt. His ribs felt like broken glass. His leg throbbed in time with his heartbeat. And somehow, impossibly, he was alive. Because a woman he'd never met had decided he was worth saving. He filed that away to think about later. Right now, sleep was pulling at him with both hands, and he was too tired to fight it. When he woke up, it was dark, and Mara was sitting by the fire with something in her lap. Papers, he realized when his eyes adjusted. She was reading them with the kind of focus that suggested they were important. "What time is it?" His voice came out like gravel. She looked up, didn't seem surprised he was awake. "Near midnight. How do you feel?" "Like I got buried in an avalanche." "Accurate." She set the papers aside, came over with water. "Drink. Then you can have more food if you think you can keep it down." He managed the water this time without help. His hand still shook, but less. The food, same stew, still oversalted, stayed down. Progress. "What were you reading?" he asked. Mara's expression shuddered. "Nothing important," which meant it was very important. Rowan had spent enough time reading people to know a deflection when he heard one. But he was in her cabin, in her bed, alive because of her. He didn't push. Instead, he asked, "How bad is it outside?" "Storm's coming in. We're stuck here for at least 3 days, maybe a week." She said it matter-of-factly, like being trapped in a cabin with a stranger was just another Tuesday. "Your leg needs to stay immobilized. Ribs need time to heal. You're not going anywhere even if the weather clears." "Lucky me." "Could be worse. You could still be under that ridge." Fair point. Rowan shifted, trying to find a position that didn't make everything hurt, and failed. "You live here alone?" "Why? You planning something?" "Just making conversation." Mara studied him for a long moment, like she was deciding whether he was worth the breath it took to answer. Finally, "Yeah, alone. Been that way for 5 years." "Family?" "Had one, don't anymore." The way she said it made it clear that topic was closed. "You?" "Same." They sat in silence after that, the fire crackling between them. Outside, wind started picking up, rattling the windows. The storm Mara had predicted making its entrance. "Thank you," Rowan said finally, "for digging me out. For this." He gestured vaguely at the cabin, the bed, the fact that he was breathing. Mara shrugged. "Don't thank me yet. Storm's bad enough. We might both end up regretting it." But there was something in her eyes that suggested she didn't regret it. Not really. Rowan wondered what kind of person spent 5 years alone in the mountains and still risked her life for a stranger. Wondered what she was running from that made isolation look like safety. "Get some sleep," she said, standing. "I'll wake you in a few hours." "Where are you sleeping?" "Chair. I've done worse." She moved back to the fire, settled into the rough wooden chair with the ease of long practice. The papers she'd been reading earlier were gone, tucked away somewhere he couldn't see. Rowan wanted to argue. It was her bed, her cabin, but his body had other ideas. Sleep pulled him under before he could form the words. And this time, he didn't fight it. The next 3 days blurred together. Storm hit hard, wind howling like something alive and angry. Snow piled up against the cabin until Mara had to dig out the door twice a day just to keep it from being buried completely. Rowan drifted in and out, fever setting in on day 2 from the lung injury. Mara kept him alive with the same grim efficiency she'd used to dig him out: water, broth, blankets when he shook with cold cloths when the fever spiked. He heard himself talking sometimes, rambling, saying things he'd never intended to say out loud. "Had a brother," he mumbled once, deep in fever. "Killed him. My fault." Mara's hand was cool on his forehead. Fever talking. "No, truth. My fault he's dead." She didn't answer that, just kept the cloth moving, gentle, despite her rough hands. Another time. "Why are you here? What are you hiding from?" "Same thing as you," she said quietly. "Everything." But when the fever finally broke on the 4th day, Rowan woke up weak as a newborn but clear-headed. Mara was at the table working on something with a knife. He watched her for a while before speaking. "How long was I out?" 3 days. Fever broke last night." She didn't look up from whatever she was carving. "You talk in your sleep." "I know. Sorry." "Don't be. Wasn't saying anything I haven't heard before." Now she did look up, and her eyes were gentler than her voice. "Brother?" Rowan's throat tightened. "Yeah, mining accident. I was crew boss, pushed for one more run before the end of shift. Tunnel collapsed. He was the only one who didn't make it out." "That why you're up here?" "Part of it." He shifted, testing his ribs, still hurt, but duller now. Couldn't stay in that town. Couldn't look at his wife, his kids. Couldn't be the guy who killed him. Mara set down her knife. Accident means nobody's fault. Doesn't feel that way. Never does. She stood, came over with water. "But you can't bury yourself alive just because you couldn't save him. Trust me on that." There was weight in those words. History. Rowan took the water, drank, and decided not to push. They all had their ghosts. "Storm's clearing," Mara said, moving to the window. "Should be able to get out in another day or two. Check on your place, see what's left." "What's left meaning?" "Meaning avalanches don't discriminate. If your cabin was in the path, it's gone." Fantastic. Rowan closed his eyes, did the mental inventory of everything he'd left there. Supplies, tools, the paperwork for the claim, all of it probably scattered across the mountainside now. "I've got extra supplies," Mara said, reading his mind. "We'll sort it out." "Why are you helping me?" She turned from the window. "Why do you keep asking that?" "Because I don't get it. We're strangers. You risked your life. Now you're sharing supplies." He met her eyes. "Nobody does that without a reason." Mara was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Maybe I'm tired of being alone up here. Maybe saving you was selfish." She grabbed her coat. "I'm going to check the perimeter. Eat something. You need your strength back." She was out the door before he could respond, letting in a blast of cold air and the kind of silence that suggested the conversation was over. Rowan sat there, staring at the door, trying to figure out this woman who'd saved his life and then claimed it was selfish, who lived alone in the mountains but still knew how to care for someone, who had ghosts in her eyes that matched his own. Outside, he heard her voice, sharp and sudden, not scared, angry. He tried to get up, made it halfway before his ribs reminded him that was a stupid idea. But he got to the window, looked out through the frost-covered glass. Mara was standing 30 feet from the cabin, staring at something in the snow. Her whole body was rigid, hands clenched at her sides. Rowan squinted, trying to see what had her so tense. Then he spotted it. Tracks. Big ones. Fresh. Leading right up to the cabin, circling it, then heading back toward the ridge. Someone had been here. During the storm, while they were both inside. Mara turned, and even from this distance, Rowan could see the fear on her face. Real fear. The kind that meant this wasn't just a curious animal or lost hiker. She came back inside fast, slammed the door, threw the bolt. Her eyes went to the papers she'd been reading that first night, still tucked away somewhere he couldn't see. "We need to talk," she said. "And you're not going to like it." Rowan looked at her, at the fear she was trying to hide behind anger, at the way her hand had gone unconsciously to the knife on her belt. "What did you find?" he asked. "When you dug me out, what was in that wreckage?" Mara's jaw tightened. For a second he thought she wasn't going to answer. Then she moved to the loose board under the bed, pried it up, and pulled out a leather document case. Expensive. The kind mining companies used for important paperwork. She threw it on the table. "This," she said. "I found this." Rowan picked it up with shaking hands, opened it. Inside were surveyor's maps, assay reports, and a claim deed, not his, for the northern ridge, dated 6 months before he'd bought the property. "That's impossible," he said slowly. "I have the deed, bought it legal." "Read the assay report." He did. Felt his blood go cold. Silver. Not just traces. A major deposit. Millions of dollars worth, hidden under that ridge. "Someone sold you a claim they didn't own," Mara said quietly. "And someone else knew about the silver. The avalanche wasn't natural." Rowan looked up at her. "You can't trigger an avalanche artificially, not reliably. You can if you know what you're doing, and if you don't care about collateral damage." She pointed at the tracks outside. "They came to check, make sure the job was done. When they saw someone survived..." She didn't finish. Didn't need to. "They'll be back," Rowan said. "Yeah." Mara's hand tightened on her knife. "They will!" Outside, the wind picked up again, howling around the cabin like something alive and hungry. Inside, two people who'd been running from their pasts stared at documents that proved the past had just caught up. And somewhere out there in the snow, someone was making plans. Boat. The sun set early, winter light fading fast. Mara moved through the cabin with purpose now, checking supplies, securing the door and windows. Rowan watched from the bed, frustrated by his uselessness. "How many do you think?" he asked. "Tracks suggest 2, maybe 3. Mara pulled a rifle down from above the door, checked it with practiced efficiency. "They'll wait for weather, won't risk coming in another storm. So we have time." "Maybe." She set the rifle aside, came to sit at the table, spread out the documents again. "This claim deed? You recognize the name?" Rowan leaned forward despite his ribs' protest. "Cartwright. That's the guy I bought from. Cartwright sold you land he didn't own. Question is, did he know?" Mara's finger traced the assay report date. "This is from 8 months ago, before he sold to you. If he knew about the silver, he would have kept it or sold for way more than I paid." Rowan shook his head. "He seemed legitimate. Lawyer handled everything." "Lawyer got a name?" "Morrison. Out of Helena." Mara's expression went dark. "Thomas Morrison? You know him?" "Know of him. He's got a reputation. The kind where half his clients end up losing everything and he somehow always comes out ahead." She tapped the deed. "This is a setup. Morrison sells you fake deed. You think you own the land. Real owners trigger avalanche to clear you out and start mining. I don't die easy, apparently." "Neither do I." But there was no humor in her voice. "Which is why those tracks worry me. They came to check on the avalanche, found your body gone, found my tracks leading here." The implications settled over them like fresh snow, quiet, cold, suffocating. "They know you saved me," Rowan said. "Yeah. Which makes you a witness." "Yeah." They sat in silence after that. Outside, full dark had fallen, and with it came the sounds of the mountain at night, wind, settling snow, and maybe, just maybe, something else. Mara heard it too. She grabbed the rifle, moved to the window, stood there for 5 minutes, barely breathing, listening. "Nothing," she said finally. But she didn't put the gun down. Rowan tried to think. His ribs hurt, his leg throbbed, his head felt stuffed with cotton. But under it all, the old instincts were kicking in. The ones that had kept him alive in minds that wanted to kill him. The ones that read danger in the shift of rock and the quality of silence. "We can't stay here," he said. "You can't travel. Not for another week minimum." "Don't have a week." Mara turned from the window. "You'll die out there. Storm's not over. Your lung is barely functional. Your leg will be even less functional if whoever triggered that avalanche comes back to finish the job." He met her eyes. "You know I'm right." She did. He could see it in the way her jaw tightened. "Where would we even go?" "Helena, Morrison's there. So are the authorities who need to see these documents." Rowan gestured at the papers. "You've got proof of fraud, attempted murder, illegal claim jumping. 3 days through winter mountains, with you barely able to walk." Mara shook her head. "It's suicide. Staying is suicide. At least here we can defend ourselves." "Against how many? You said 2 or 3. What if it's more? What if they come with guns and gasoline and just burn us out?" The question hung between them. "You saved my life. I'm not giving them the chance to end yours." Mara stared at him for a long moment. Then she laughed, short, bitter. "You don't even know me." "I know enough. I know you spent 2 hours digging through unstable wreckage for a stranger. I know you've kept me alive for 4 days when it would have been easier to let me die. I know you've got ghosts that match mine." He paused. "And I know you're scared, really scared. And it takes a lot to scare someone who lives alone up here." Her hand tightened on the rifle. "There are things you don't know." "Then tell me." She was quiet so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, "This land, my cabin, it's not just where I live, it's all I have left." "Left from what?" "From before." She moved back to the table, set the rifle down. 5 years ago, I had a family. Husband, daughter. We worked a claim down south, small operation, barely making it, but it was ours. Rowan waited, didn't push. Morrison found us, said the claim was disputed, had paperwork showing prior ownership. My husband fought it. Legally at first, then... She stopped, started again. They burned our cabin. My daughter was inside. She was 6. The words fell into the space between them like stones into deep water. Heavy. Final. Your husband? Rowan asked quietly. Killed himself 2 months later. Couldn't live with it. Mara's voice was flat now, empty. I tried to fight, tried to get justice. Nobody cared. Small claim, no proof. Morrison's clients had better lawyers. So you came here? So I came here. Built this place with my own hands. Made sure the deed was clean. Made sure nobody could take it from me again. She looked at him. And now they're going to try anyway. Rowan understood now. The fear, the anger. Why she'd risked everything to save him. Because she knew what it was like to lose everything. They won't, he said. You don't know that. No, but I know we've got a choice. We can wait here for them to come with guns and fire. Or we can take these documents and make Morrison answer for what he's done. He leaned forward despite the pain. You said you tried to fight before. Legally. It didn't work because you didn't have proof. Now you do. This deed, these assay reports, evidence of fraud. It's not enough. It's a start. And it's more than you had before. Mara stood there, hands flat on the table, staring at the documents that represented everything she'd been running from. Her past, her pain, her ghosts. 3 days through winter mountains, she said finally. You can barely walk. Then you'll have to help me. If we die out there, we die fighting. Isn't that better than dying here? Trapped? She looked at him then, really looked at him. Seeing not just the broken man she'd dug out of the snow, but maybe something else. Someone who understood. Someone who'd run from his past too and was tired of running. We leave at first light, she said. Pack only what we can carry. Food, water, fire supplies, the documents. She picked up the rifle. And this. You really think they'll come after us? I know they will. She moved to the window again, looked out at the darkness. They've killed for this before. They'll kill again. Rowan tried to stand, made it halfway before his leg gave out. Mara caught him, strong hands steadying him, and for a second they were close enough that he could see the scars on her face he hadn't noticed before. Old ones. The kind that came from surviving things that should have killed you. Thank you, he said. For what? Getting you killed 3 days from now instead of 4 days ago? For giving a damn. About a stranger. About justice. About anything. He met her eyes. Most people would have left me. You didn't. That means something. Mara's expression softened just a fraction. Don't thank me yet. We've got a long way to go, and a lot of ways to die between here and Helena. She helped him back to the bed. His ribs screamed, his leg throbbed, but under the pain something else was building. Not hope, he wasn't that stupid, but maybe determination, maybe purpose. He'd come to these mountains to hide from his past, to bury himself in isolation and pretend that was the same as healing. Instead, he'd found someone who understood what it meant to lose everything and keep going anyway. Get some sleep, Mara said. Tomorrow's going to be hell. Today was already hell. Today was Tuesday. Wait till you see what Wednesday brings. Despite everything, the pain, the danger, the very real possibility they were both going to die, Rowan smiled. You always this optimistic? Only on special occasions. But there was the ghost of a smile on her face, too. Sleep. I'll keep watch. You've been keeping watch for 3 days. I'll sleep when we're dead, or when we make it to Helena. She settled into her chair by the fire, rifle across her lap. Whichever comes first. Rowan lay back, staring at the ceiling. Outside, the wind howled. The mountain groaned under its burden of snow and ice. And somewhere out there, people who'd killed before were making plans. But inside this small cabin, 2 broken people who'd spent years running from their pasts had just made a different choice. They were going to fight. Dawn came cold and gray, the kind of light that didn't promise anything good. Mara was already up, had been for hours probably, packing supplies into 2 weathered backpacks with the efficiency of someone who'd done this before. Rowan watched her from the bed, trying to work up the courage to stand. "Coffee's on the stove," she said without looking at him. "Drink it. You'll need it." He managed to sit up this time without blacking out. Progress. The coffee was strong enough to strip paint and tasted like it had been made with melted snow and spite, but it was hot, and it was caffeine, and right now that was enough. "How's the leg?" Mara asked, finally turning to look at him. "Terrible. Can you walk on it?" "Have to, don't I?" She came over with something he recognized, a makeshift crutch carved from a branch and wrapped with leather strapping. "Made this last night. It'll help. Won't make it easy, but nothing about today is going to be easy." Rowan took it, tested his weight. His legs screamed but held. "How far to Helena?" "Straight shot? 60 miles, the way we have to go?" She grimaced. "Closer to 80. 3 days if the weather holds and you don't collapse. And if the weather doesn't hold, then we die slower than if we stay here." She grabbed one of the packs, shrugged it on like it weighed nothing. "Eat something. Bread's in the tin. We leave in 20 minutes." The bread was dense and hard and probably a week old, but Rowan forced it down. His stomach rebelled, settled, accepted its fate. He was lacing up his boots, the ones Mara had somehow salvaged from the avalanche site, when she spoke again. "The tracks from yesterday, they came back." His hands stilled. "When?" "Few hours before dawn, circled the cabin again, closer this time." She checked the rifle's action, loaded it with movements so practiced they were probably muscle memory. "They know we're here. They're just deciding when to move. Then we're leaving just in time. Or walking right into them." She slung the rifle across her back, grabbed the second pack. "Either way, we don't have a choice anymore." Rowan stood, tested his weight on the crutch again. Everything hurt. His ribs felt like someone had replaced them with broken glass. His leg throbbed with each heartbeat. But he was upright, and that was something. Mara watched him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Last chance to change your mind. Stay here. I'll make the run alone. Faster that way." "And leave you to face them by yourself? After you dragged my sorry ass out of the snow?" He shook his head. "Not happening. You'll slow me down. Probably. But you'll have backup." He gestured at himself. "Broken backup, but still." Something that might have been respect flickered across her face. "You're either brave or stupid. Can it be both?" "Usually is." She opened the door, cold air flooding in. Outside, the world was white and gray and utterly hostile. "Stay close. Watch where I step. If I tell you to run, you run. If I tell you to hide, you hide. If I tell you to shut up, I shut up. Got it?" "Good." She stepped out into the snow. "Let's see if we can survive the next hour before we worry about the next 3 days." The cold hit like a fist. Rowan's breath crystallized instantly, frost forming on his beard. The crutch sank into snow that came up past his knees, and every step was a negotiation between forward momentum and falling flat on his face. Mara moved ahead, breaking trail, but she kept looking back, making sure he was still upright, still moving. The cabin disappeared behind them within minutes, swallowed by trees and snow and the particular emptiness of wilderness in winter. "Talk to me," Mara said after they'd been walking for what felt like hours but was probably 20 minutes. "Keep your mind off the pain." "What do you want to talk about?" "Anything? Your brother? Why you really came up here? Favorite color? Don't care." She pushed through a drift that came up to her thighs. "Just need to know you're still conscious." Yet Rowan's leg was on fire. His ribs felt like they were trying to saw through his lungs from the inside, but he talked anyway. His name was Danny, younger by 3 years. Always wanted to work the mines like our dad did. "Your dad a miner?" "Was. Black lung got him when I was 17. Told Danny to do anything else. Anything. He didn't listen." The crutch slipped on ice hidden under the snow. Mara caught his arm before he went down. "Thanks. Keep going." He was good at it. Better than me, maybe. Had this instinct for where to dig, where not to dig. Like he could hear the mountain talking. Rowan's voice caught. "That last day he told me something felt wrong, said we should stop. I told him we were behind quota, needed one more run." Mara didn't say anything, just kept walking, kept breaking trail. Tunnel came down 15 minutes later. We got everyone out except him, found his body 3 days later. He stopped, breath coming hard. His wife wouldn't talk to me at the funeral. His kids, they're 10 and 7, they just stared at me like I was the thing that killed their dad. And they were right. No, they weren't. You weren't there. Don't need to be. Mara stopped, turned to face him. Her cheeks were red from cold, her eyes hard. You made a call. Bad call. But you made it trying to do your job. The mountain made the choice to come down, not you. Doesn't feel that way. Never does. Trust me on that. She looked away, and Rowan saw something in her face that looked like his own guilt reflected back. My daughter's name was Emma. She loved horses, drew pictures of them all the time, covered our cabin walls with them. The shift in topic was abrupt, but Rowan understood. Fair trade. Pain for pain. The day they came, Morrison's people, she was supposed to be at a neighbor's. My husband was going to take her, but she wanted to finish a drawing first, just one more drawing. Mara's voice went flat. So he let her stay. 10 minutes, that's all. They weren't supposed to come till afternoon. Mara, they came early, barred the door from outside. My husband and I were at the claim site, half a mile away. By the time we saw the smoke, she stopped walking. We ran. I've never run that fast in my life, but it wasn't fast enough. The wind picked up, throwing snow into their faces. Mara turned back, started walking again, and Rowan followed. What else could he do? I'm sorry, he said. Everyone's sorry. Doesn't bring her back. But her voice cracked on the last word. Doesn't change the fact that I let it happen. You didn't let anything happen. They killed her. I should have been there. You would have died too. Maybe that would have been better. She said it so quietly, he almost missed it under the wind. They walked in silence after that. The pain in Rowan's leg had gone from acute to a dull roar that was almost worse. His ribs grated with each breath, but he kept moving because Mara kept moving, and somehow her pain made his more bearable, or maybe just put it in perspective. The sun climbed higher but gave no warmth. They were following what Mara called the southern route, longer than going through the pass, but less likely to kill them if another storm hit. Trees pressed close on both sides, pine and spruce heavy with snow, beautiful in a way that wanted them dead. Stop, Mara said suddenly, hand going up. Rowan froze. What? She was staring at something ahead, body tense. Then she pointed. Tracks. Fresh. He looked where she indicated. Sure enough, boot prints in the snow. 2 sets, maybe 3, leading perpendicular to their path. How fresh? Hour, maybe less. She knelt, examining them with the focus of someone who'd done a lot of tracking. Heavy boots. Men. Moving fast. Her eyes followed the trail. They're heading toward the cabin. Good. Means they're behind us. Or means they split up, some to the cabin, some to cut us off. She stood, brushed snow from her knees. We need to move faster. I'm going as fast as I can. Then you need to go faster than that. But her tone wasn't cruel, just practical. She grabbed his arm, took some of his weight. Come on, lean on me. They moved quicker that way, Mara bearing half his weight, the crutch doing the rest. It should have been awkward, but somehow it worked. 2 broken people holding each other up, racing against men who wanted them dead, and a mountain that didn't care either way. An hour later, maybe 2, time got weird when everything hurt. They stopped at a creek. The water ran fast enough not to freeze, cutting a dark line through the white. Mara refilled their canteens while Rowan collapsed against a tree and tried to remember how to breathe without feeling like his ribs were stabbing his lungs. Drink, Mara said, handing him a canteen. Eat. She shoved something at him, dried meat, hard as leather. Then we keep moving. Where are we? Maybe 20 miles from the cabin, 60 to Helena. She scanned the trees, eyes never stopping. If we're lucky, we make the old ranger station by nightfall, get a roof over our heads. And if we're not lucky, we freeze to death in the open, but at least we'll die free. She said it with a straight face, like that was supposed to be comforting. Rowan bit into the dried meat, jaw working. It tasted like salt and smoke and survival. You really think they'll follow us all the way to Helena? I think they've already killed for this silver deposit. Probably killed before that. They're not going to stop because their first attempt failed. She drank from her own canteen, eyes still scanning. Morrison's smart. Careful. He doesn't leave loose ends. We're loose ends. Then we make ourselves into something worse than loose ends. Like what? Witnesses, evidence, people who can put him in prison. Rowan shifted, trying to find a position that didn't make everything scream. He comes after us, we make sure everyone knows why. Mara smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. You're assuming we live long enough to tell anyone. I'm assuming you're too stubborn to die, and I'm too guilty to let you die alone. That's a hell of a survival strategy. It's what we've got. She laughed, short, sharp. Fair enough, come on. We've got another 6 hours of hiking before dark. Let's see if your guilt can carry you that far. It almost didn't. By the time the sun started thinking about setting, early, because winter didn't mess around, Rowan's leg had gone from painful to numb to something that felt like it was being slowly sawed off with a rusty blade. His ribs had given up screaming and settled into a grinding ache that made every breath an adventure. The crutch had rubbed his armpit raw enough that blood was soaking into his shirt. But he kept moving because Mara kept moving, and somehow that was enough. The ranger station appeared out of the twilight like a gift. Small, rough, probably abandoned for a decade, but it had walls and a roof, and that made it a palace. Mara got the door open with a shoulder slam that suggested the lock had rusted through years ago. Inside was one room, mostly empty except for a broken table, a rusted stove, and evidence that various animals had used it as a hotel. But it was shelter, and right now that was everything. Check for holes in the roof, Mara said, already moving around the space with practiced efficiency. I'll see if the stove works. There were holes, small ones. Mara stuffed them with rags from her pack and snow from outside, packed tight. The stove was a lost cause, rusted through in multiple places, but she built a fire in the corner anyway, on the stone floor where it wouldn't spread. Smoke would have to find its own way out. Rowan collapsed against the wall and finally let himself stop. His leg was swollen to twice its normal size inside the splint. His ribs felt like they'd been replaced with shattered pottery. He was pretty sure he was running a fever again. Let me see the leg, Mara said, coming over with her pack. It's fine. It's not fine. Let me see it or I'll cut your pants off. He let her see it. She unwrapped the splint carefully, and even she couldn't hide the wince when she saw what was underneath. The whole leg was purple and black, swollen, hot to the touch. Infected? Rowan asked. Maybe. Probably. She pulled out a bottle of something that smelled like it could strip paint. This is going to hurt. Everything already hurts. Then this will hurt more. She poured the liquid over the worst of the swelling. Rowan bit down on his own fist to keep from screaming. Failed. The sound that came out was somewhere between a grunt and a howl, and Mara just kept working, cleaning the wound with hands that were gentle despite everything. Done, she said finally, rewrapping the splint. It'll hold, maybe, if you're lucky and we don't have to run. And if we have to run? Then you'll run on it and deal with the consequences later. She sat back, wiped her hands. Or you'll stay here and I'll go on alone. Not happening. You're going to get yourself killed being stubborn. Probably, but at least I'll die doing something that matters. He met her eyes. 5 years you've been hiding up here. 5 years of letting them win. Now you've got a chance to make them pay. You really going to let me take that from you? Mara stared at him for a long moment. Then she pulled out the documents, still dry, still intact in their leather case, spread them on the broken table. Morrison's signature is on everything. The fake deed, the assay reports, transfer papers. That's good. That's evidence. It's evidence that implicates him in fraud. Not murder. She traced the signature with one finger. My daughter. Your brother. We can't prove they were killed for this. Can't prove they weren't either. Rowan dragged himself closer to the table. You said Morrison's been doing this for years. How many other claims? How many other families? I don't know. Dozens, maybe. Then we find them. We find everyone he's screwed over and we make a pattern. Show the authorities this isn't one bad deal. It's a system. His finger stabbed at the assay report. This silver deposit alone is worth millions. How much you want to bet he's got investors lined up? People with money who don't want questions asked? Mara's eyes narrowed. You think bigger than fraud? I think a man who'll kill a 6-year-old to steal land isn't working alone, and I think whoever's backing him has just as much to lose. Rowan leaned back, breath coming hard. We get to Helena. We don't just go to the local sheriff. We go to the territorial marshal. Hell, we go to the newspapers. Make enough noise that they can't bury it. That's assuming we get there. Yeah, big assumption. He looked at her across the firelight. But you didn't dig me out of an avalanche to give up now, and I didn't survive being buried alive to roll over for men who think money means they can kill whoever they want. Mara was quiet for a long time. Outside, full dark had fallen, and with it came the sounds of the forest at night. Wind, settling snow, the crack of branches breaking under the weight of ice. My husband gave up, she said finally, after Emma died. After the claim was gone, he just stopped fighting, stopped caring. I came back from town one day and found him in the barn. She didn't need to finish. Rowan knew how that story ended. I was angry at him for a long time. Angry that he left me alone. Angry that he got to escape and I didn't. She looked up, and her eyes were wet. Then I realized I'd been doing the same thing. Not with a rope, but with isolation. With running. With pretending I could hide from it. You built a life up here. I built a grave. Made it comfortable. Called it living. She wiped her eyes roughly. You're right. I didn't dig you out just to give up. And I didn't keep you alive just to let them win. So we fight. She stood, moved to the door, checked outside. Came back satisfied they were alone. Get some sleep. I'll take first watch. You've been taking every watch. You've been half dead. Tonight you're only quarter dead. Progress. But there was warmth in her voice now, something that hadn't been there before. Sleep, Rowan. We've got 40 miles left and 2 days to cover them. You'll need your strength. He wanted to argue, wanted to insist on helping keep watch, but his body had other ideas. The moment he closed his eyes, sleep dragged him under like a riptide. He dreamed of his brother, of the tunnel collapse. But this time when they dug through the rubble, it wasn't Danny they found. It was a little girl with pictures of horses scattered around her body. She opened her eyes and asked why nobody came to save her. Rowan woke up gasping, sweat soaking his shirt despite the cold. Easy, Mara's voice calm in the darkness. Just a dream. Yeah, he wiped his face. Just a dream. She was sitting by the fire, rifle across her lap, eyes on the door. Hadn't moved from when he'd fallen asleep. How long had that been? An hour? 3? You should sleep, he said. Already did. 2 hours. Your turn to watch. I can barely stand. Don't need to stand. Just need to stay awake and shoot anything that comes through that door that isn't me. She handed him the rifle. Think you can manage that? Probably. Good enough. She moved to where he'd been lying, settled down with her coat as a pillow. Wake me if you hear anything. And Rowan? Yeah? Don't fall asleep. I'd hate to have kept you alive this long just to have you get us both killed because you dozed off. No pressure. Never is. Within minutes, her breathing had evened out. Asleep or doing a good impression of it. Rowan sat with the rifle across his knees and watched the door. The fire had burned down to coals, barely enough light to see by. Outside, the wind had picked up again, rattling the walls. He could hear ice forming on the broken windows, the creak of trees bending under snow. His leg throbbed. His ribs ached. His head felt stuffed with cotton and broken glass. But he stayed awake because Mara needed him to, and somehow that was more motivation than any amount of coffee. An hour passed. Maybe 2. Hard to tell in the dark. Then he heard it. A sound that wasn't wind. Wasn't trees. Footsteps crunching through snow. Rowan's hand tightened on the rifle. He didn't move. Didn't breathe. Just listened. There. Again. Closer now. Someone was circling the building. He reached over, touched Mara's shoulder. She came awake instantly, hand going to the knife on her belt before her eyes were fully open. Outside, he whispered. Someone circling. She was up in one smooth motion, moving to the window. Looked out through a crack in the boards. Her expression went hard. 2 of them, maybe 3. Can't tell in the dark. She came back, grabbed her pack. We need to move. Now. There's only one door. There's also a window on the back wall, Board it up, but we can break through. She was already moving, Rowan struggling to follow. Come on. The window boards were old, half-rotted. Mara hit them twice with her shoulder and they splintered. Cold air rushed in, along with snow and the sound of voices getting closer. You first, Mara said. I can't. You can. Go. I'll cover you. There wasn't time to argue. Rowan grabbed his crutch, shoved it through the window, then followed. The drop was only a few feet, but his leg buckled when he hit, sending him face first into snow. He heard Mara come through behind him, heard her grab his arm and haul him up. Run, she hissed. Can't. Then hobble fast. They moved into the trees, Rowan leaning heavily on both Mara and the crutch. Behind them, he heard the station door slam open, heard voices, angry, frustrated. They were here. Fire's still warm. Check the perimeter. They can't have gone far, not with him injured. Mara pulled him deeper into the trees. The darkness that had been their enemy was now their ally. She seemed to move by instinct, finding paths through the undergrowth that Rowan couldn't see. His legs screamed with every step, but he kept moving because stopping meant dying, and he'd already decided that wasn't happening tonight. They'd gone maybe half a mile when Mara finally stopped, pressed them both against a massive pine trunk. Rowan's breath came in ragged gasps that he tried to muffle against his coat sleeve. How many? He whispered. 3, maybe 4. Hard to tell. She was listening, head cocked. They're spreading out, searching. Can we outrun them? No, but we can outweight them. She looked up at the tree they were pressed against. Can you climb? You're joking. Do I look like I'm joking? She was already reaching for the lowest branch. Come on, they won't look up. People never look up. It was insane. It was impossible. But Rowan grabbed the branch she offered and pulled himself up anyway, because apparently insanity was the theme of the week. His ribs shrieked. His leg threatened to give out entirely. But Mara was above him, reaching down, pulling him up branch by branch until they were 15 feet off the ground and hidden in pine needles that smelled like Christmas and imminent death. They pressed themselves against the trunk and waited. The searchers came through 5 minutes later. Rowan could see them between the branches, 3 men, well-armed, moving with the confidence of people who knew what they were doing. One of them stopped directly under their tree. Lost the trail, he said. Too much snow. They can't have gone far. Not with the cripple. Another voice, rougher. Spread out. 20-yard intervals. We'll find them. They moved on. Rowan didn't breathe until their voices had faded completely. Even then, Mara waited another 10 minutes before speaking. We stay here till dawn, she whispered. Let them search themselves tired. Then we move. We'll freeze. Rather freeze than get shot. But she was already pulling something from her pack. A thin emergency blanket. The kind that looked useless but trapped body heat. She wrapped it around both of them, pressed close. Body heat. Don't get any ideas. Wouldn't dream of it. They sat like that, pressed together in a pine tree while armed men searched the forest below. It should have been terrifying. It was terrifying, but there was something almost absurdly intimate about it too. 2 people who barely knew each other, huddled together for warmth while running from death. Thank you, Rowan said quietly. For what? For not leaving me back at the station. Would have been easier. Everything would be easier if I'd left you under that avalanche. Hasn't stopped me yet. But her voice was soft, tired. Besides, you're starting to grow on me. Like a fungus? Exactly like a fungus. They fell quiet after that. Below them, occasionally they'd hear footsteps, voices. The searchers were thorough, professional. This wasn't their first hunt, but eventually, hours later, when the cold had seeped so deep into Rowan's bones he couldn't remember what warm felt like, the sounds faded. The searchers moved on, convinced their quarry had somehow gotten past them in the dark. Dawn came slowly, gray light filtering through the pines. Mara stirred, checked the forest below, nodded. Clear, let's move. Getting down was worse than climbing up. Rowan's leg had stiffened in the cold, and he nearly fell twice. But they made it, stumbling into snow that had drifted deeper during the night. How far did we get yesterday? Rowan asked. 20 miles, maybe. We've got another 40 to Helena. Mara oriented herself, pointed. That way. Stay close. And for what it's worth, Yeah? Next time someone tells you to climb a tree, try not to look like you're attending your own funeral. I'll work on that. They started walking as the sun climbed higher, two figures moving through an endless expanse of white. Behind them, somewhere, men with guns were still searching. Ahead, somewhere, was a city that might mean safety or might mean more trouble. Between here and there were 40 miles of winter that didn't care about their problems. But they kept moving anyway. Because giving up wasn't an option anymore. Because they'd already survived too much to quit now. Because sometimes the only way forward was through, and if that meant walking 40 miles on a broken leg while being hunted by killers, then that's what you did. The second day was worse than the first, and the third day made the second look like a pleasant stroll through a meadow. By noon on day 2, Rowan's fever had come back with a vengeance, turning everything into a blur of white snow and gray sky, and Mara's voice cutting through the haze, telling him to keep moving, just keep moving, one more step. His leg had stopped being a leg and become something else entirely. A foreign object attached to his body. Dead weight that screamed whenever he put pressure on it. The crutch had broken that morning, snapped clean through when he'd tried to use it to vault over a fallen log, and now he was reduced to using a tree branch that was too short and too thick and dug into his armpit like it had a personal grudge. "How much farther?" he asked, for probably the 100th time. "Same answer as the last 99 times you asked. Still 25 miles. Mara was ahead of him, breaking trail through snow that came up to her knees. She hadn't slept in what had to be 48 hours. Hadn't complained once. Just kept moving with the grim determination of someone who'd decided dying wasn't on today's agenda. Rowan stumbled, caught himself against a tree. The world tilted sideways, and he waited for it to right itself. Took longer than it should have. "I need to stop," he said. "Can't stop. Not here. Too exposed." "Mara, another mile. There's an overhang. We can rest there." She looked back at him, and even through the fever he could see the worry in her eyes. "You can make another mile." "Not sure I can." "You can, because the alternative is freezing to death, and I didn't haul you this far to watch you die now." She came back, grabbed his arm, took his weight. "Come on, lean on me. We do this together." They did it together, one agonizing step at a time. The miles stretched out like hours, like days, like forever. But eventually, the overhang appeared, a rock face that jutted out just enough to provide shelter from the wind and snow that had started falling again. Mara got him settled, back against stone that was somehow colder than the air. She built a fire with hands that shook from exhaustion, fed it carefully with the dwindling supply of dry wood from her pack. "Drink," she said, handing him a canteen. The water tasted like metal and ice. Rowan drank anyway because she told him to, and at this point, following her orders seemed like the only thing keeping him alive. "Your leg's bad," Mara said. Not a question. "Yeah." "How bad?" "Can't feel my toes, can feel everything else too much." He tried to laugh, but it came out as a cough that made his ribs remind him they were still broken. "Think the infection's spreading." Mara pulled out her knife, held it in the fire until the blade glowed. "I need to look at it." "No, wasn't asking." She came over, started unwrapping the splint. "This is going to hurt." "Everything hurts." "This will hurt more." She wasn't lying. The splint came off and Rowan bit down on his own arm to keep from screaming. His leg from knee to ankle was swollen to twice its normal size, purple-black with streaks of red running up toward his thigh. The wound where bone had punched through skin was weeping something that definitely wasn't supposed to come out of a human body. "That's bad," Rowan said. "Yeah." Mara's jaw was tight. "I need to drain it, clean it. If I don't, you'll be dead in 2 days. Maybe less." "And if you do?" "You might be dead in 3 days. But at least we tried." She positioned the hot knife. "Bite down on something." He grabbed a stick from the firewood pile, shoved it between his teeth, nodded. Mara cut. The world went white. Not from snow, from pain so complete it erased everything else. Rowan heard himself making sounds that weren't quite human. Felt Mara's hands working, draining the infection, cleaning the wound with something that burned worse than the knife. Felt her pack it with moss and cloth and her last clean bandage. When she was done, he was shaking so hard his teeth rattled. Mara wrapped him in both their coats and the emergency blanket and sat with her back against his, sharing body heat. "Sorry," she said quietly. "For what? Saving my life again? For hurting you? Rather hurt than dead." He tried to stop shaking and couldn't. "How's it look?" "Like hell. But I got most of the infection out. If we're lucky, if you're strong enough, you might keep the leg. And if I'm not lucky? Then you lose the leg. Or you die. Or both." She said it matter-of-factly like she was discussing the weather. "But we're not going to let that happen." "We? You think I'm doing all this work just to let you die now? I've got an investment in keeping you breathing." But there was something in her voice that suggested it was more than that. Something that said maybe she'd gotten used to not being alone up here. They sat like that while the fire burned and the snow fell, and somewhere behind them men were still searching. Rowan drifted in and out of fever dreams, saw his brother, saw a little girl with pictures of horses, saw Mara's face overlaid on both of them, asking why nobody came to save them. When he came back to himself, the fire had burned low and Mara was checking the documents again, making sure they were still dry, still intact, their evidence, their proof, their ticket to maybe surviving this. "Tell me it's worth it," Rowan said. His voice came out rough, barely above a whisper. Mara looked up. "What?" "All that told this. The running, the pain. Tell me it's worth it." She was quiet for a long moment. Then she folded the documents carefully, put them back in their case. "My daughter died screaming. My husband died broken. I've spent 5 years hiding in the mountains because I was too afraid to face the men who destroyed my family." She met his eyes. "If there's even a chance we can make them pay, make them answer for what they've done, then, yeah, it's worth it. Even if we die trying. Especially if we die trying. At least then we went down fighting instead of hiding." She poked the fire, sending sparks up into the darkness. "Your brother, if he could see you now, what would he say?" Rowan thought about that. About Danny, with his easy smile and his instinct for where to dig. About the last conversation they'd had, Danny saying something felt wrong, Rowan pushing anyway. He'd probably tell me I'm an idiot for getting buried in an avalanche. Probably. Then he'd tell me to finish what I started, see it through. Rowan shifted, pain lancing through his leg. He was always better at seeing things through than me. I was the one who quit when things got hard. "You're not quitting now. Can't. You won't let me." "Damn right I won't." She stood, checked outside, came back satisfied they were still alone. "Get some sleep. Real sleep. I'll keep watch." "You need sleep too." "I'll sleep when we're in Helena, in a bed, with a door that locks and armed guards outside." She settled against the rock wall, rifle across her lap. "Until then, one of us stays awake. And right now, you're in no shape to shoot anything except maybe your own foot." "Fair point." Sleep took him quickly this time. No dreams, just darkness and the distant sound of Mara humming something under her breath. A lullaby, maybe. Or a song she used to sing to her daughter. He didn't ask. Some things were too private to question. When he woke, gray dawn was filtering in and Mara was shaking his shoulder. "We need to move. Now." He sat up too fast, head spinning. "What's wrong?" "Smoke. North of here. Maybe 2 miles." Her face was grim. "They're burning the forest, trying to flush us out or kill us in the fire. Either way, we can't stay here." Rowan tried to stand. His leg buckled immediately and he went down hard. Mara caught him before he hit the ground. "I can't," he said. The words tasted like defeat. "You can. You will." She got him upright, positioned the makeshift crutch under his arm. 23 miles to Helena. We can make that in a day and a half if we push." "A day and a half?" "Mara, I can barely make 23 feet. Then we go 23 feet. Then 23 more. Then we keep going until we hit pavement and civilization and people who can't murder us without witnesses." She grabbed both packs, slung one on her back, the other across her chest. "Move. Now. Before that fire gets close enough to matter." They moved. Rowan had no idea how. His leg was a distant throb now, the infection doing its work, fever making everything shimmer at the edges. But Mara was beside him, under him, holding him up when he stumbled and pushing him forward when he wanted to stop. The smoke got closer. They could smell it now, thick and acrid. Behind them, the sky was taking on an orange glow that had nothing to do with sunrise. "They're insane," Rowan gasped. "Forest fire in winter, they'll kill themselves too." "They don't care. They just want us dead." Mara pulled him around a stand of trees. "And they're willing to burn half the mountain to make it happen." The fire was moving faster than they were. That became obvious within an hour. The smoke was thick enough now to make breathing hard, and Rowan could hear it, the roar of flames consuming timber, the crack of trees exploding from the heat. "We're not going to outrun it," he said. "No, but we don't have to." Mara pointed ahead. "Creek bed, half-mile. We get there, we get in the water, we let the fire pass over us." "That's insane." "You have a better plan?" He didn't. So they ran, or Mara ran and dragged him along. The smoke got thicker. Ash started falling like gray snow. Behind them, the roar of the fire was getting louder, closer, hungry. The creek bed appeared through the smoke like salvation. Mara got them down the bank and into water so cold it felt like knives. It was only knee-deep, but it was flowing fast, fed by snowmelt, and it was their only chance. "Get down," Mara said. "Soak your clothes. Cover your face. Breathe through wet cloth." They got down. The water was agony on Rowan's infected leg, but he didn't care because the fire was here now, cresting the bank, racing over them with a roar like the end of the world. Heat. Impossible heat. The air itself was on fire. Rowan pressed his face into the wet cloth Mara had given him and tried to breathe. Failed. Tried again. The water around them started to steam. It lasted forever. It lasted seconds. Time meant nothing when you were drowning in air and burning in water and waiting to see if you'd survive the next breath. Then, impossibly, it passed. The roar moved on. The heat faded to something merely unbearable instead of fatal. Rowan lifted his head, gasping, and saw a landscape transformed. The trees were gone. The snow was gone. Everything was black and smoking and dead, except them. Somehow, impossibly, them. "You okay?" Mara's voice was hoarse from smoke. "Define okay." "Alive." "Are you alive?" "Unfortunately." He coughed, tasted ash and blood. "That was insane. Yeah." She pulled herself out of the water, reached down to help him. "But we survived. That's what matters." They stumbled up the bank and into a wasteland. The fire had stripped at everything, left nothing but charred earth and smoking stumps. But it had also cleared a path. No more snow to wade through, no more undergrowth to navigate. "How far to Helena?" Rowan asked. 20 miles? Maybe 19 now. Mara oriented herself by the sun, barely visible through the smoke. "We keep moving, fast as we can, before they realize we survived." They kept moving, through ash that covered everything in gray, past trees that were still burning, reduced to torches scattered across the landscape. The heat from the ground came up through their boots, and Rowan's leg had gone from infected to something worse. He could feel it, the fever climbing, the poison spreading. "I'm slowing you down," he said. "Yeah. You should leave me. Make better time alone. We've had this conversation. Answer's still no." She adjusted her grip on him, taking more of his weight. "Besides, you've got the documents. Can't let you die with evidence in your pocket. I could give them to you." "You could, but then I'd have to carry your guilt along with mine. I've got enough weight already." She pulled him forward. "So you're going to stay alive long enough to hand them over yourself. Understand? You're stubborn. Takes one to know one." By midday, Rowan's vision had started to blur at the edges. Not from smoke anymore. From fever. From infection that was eating its way through his system. He was pretty sure he was dying, more sure with every step. But Mara kept dragging him forward, through the burned forest, down into a valley that had been spared the worst of it, up the other side. Her strength seemed infinite, impossible, like she was running on pure spite and determination. "There," she said suddenly. Rowan looked where she was pointing. Through the haze he could see it. Buildings, roads, the outer edge of Helena sprawling across the valley floor. "We made it," he said. Couldn't quite believe it. "Not yet, still 5 miles, and we're not safe until we're inside city limits with witnesses." But there was something like hope in her voice. Fragile, desperate, real. They pushed on. The landscape changed from burned forest to scrubland to the first signs of civilization. A fence, a road, a house with smoke coming from the chimney. Rowan's leg gave out completely 1/2 mile from the first house. He went down hard, and this time he couldn't get back up. "Leave me," he said. "Get to town. Get help." "No." Mara grabbed his arms, tried to haul him up. He was dead weight now. Too heavy. "Come on, Rowan. Not here. Not this close." "Can't." "You can. 1 more mile. That's all. 1 more mile and we're safe." "You're safe. Go." "I'm not leaving you here to die." Her voice cracked. "I didn't drag you out of the snow. Didn't fight off searchers. Didn't survive a forest fire. I didn't do all that just to leave you on the side of the road like garbage." "Mara, shut up." She was crying now. Actually crying. Tears cutting tracks through the ash on her face. "Just shut up and let me think." A sound made them both freeze. An engine coming up the road. Mara's hand went to her knife, then stopped. It was a wagon. Old, driven by a man who looked like he'd been farming this land since before Rowan was born. The wagon stopped. The farmer looked down at them, two people covered in ash and blood and desperation, and his expression didn't change. Like finding half-dead strangers on his road was just another Tuesday. "You two look like hell," he said. "Feel worse," Mara managed. The farmer looked at Rowan, at his leg, at the fever shakes. "You gonna die?" "Not if I can help it." "Where you headed?" "Helena, Marshal's office." The farmer was quiet for a moment, then he nodded. "Throw him in the back. I'll take you." They got Rowan into the wagon bed. Wasn't gentle about it. Couldn't afford to be. The farmer, he said his name was Carl, but didn't offer more. Drove like he was carrying produce to market. No urgency, no questions, just steady progress down the road toward Helena. Mara sat with Rowan's head in her lap, one hand on the documents, the other on her knife. Still didn't trust. Couldn't trust, not until they were surrounded by witnesses and law and safety. "Why are you helping us?" she asked Carl. He shrugged. "Ain't my business what you've done or what you're running from. But I know Morrison. Know what kind of man he is." He spat over the side of the wagon. "Anybody running from Morrison's got my help. That's all there is to it." They rode in silence after that. Rowan drifted in and out of consciousness. Each time he came back, Mara was still there, still holding the documents, still watching the road like enemies might appear any second. Helena rose up around them slowly. Buildings replaced open land. Streets replaced dirt roads. People appeared, actual people, walking around like the world was normal and safe and predictable. "Marshal's office is on 3rd Street, Carl said. "Can take you there direct or drop you at the hospital." "Marshal first," Mara said. "Evidence first, then hospital." "You're as stubborn as the stories say." "What stories?" "About the woman who fought Morrison 5 years ago. Lost her family, disappeared into the mountains." He glanced back at her. "You're Mara Voss, thought you were dead." "I was." "Got better." Carl almost smiled at that. "Morrison's not going to like you being alive." "Good. That's the whole point." The marshal's office was a squat brick building that looked like it had been there since before Montana was Montana. Carl pulled the wagon up front, helped get Rowan out. Mara was already at the door, documents in hand, looking like something that had crawled out of hell with a grudge. The deputy at the desk took one look at them and reached for his gun. "Easy," Mara said. "We're not here to cause trouble. We're here to report a crime." "You look like trouble." "We look like we survived attempted murder." She slammed the documents on his desk. "That's Thomas Morrison's signature. That's proof of fraud. That's evidence of illegal claim jumping and conspiracy to commit murder. And if you want us to live long enough to testify, you might want to get the marshal." Now, the deputy looked at the documents, looked at them, reached for a bell on his desk and rang it hard. The marshal appeared, older, gray-haired, with the kind of face that suggested he'd seen everything and wasn't impressed by most of it. He looked at them, at the documents, back at them. "You're Mara Voss," he said. "Yeah." "Thought you were dead." "Popular opinion. I'm not." She pointed at Rowan, who was swaying on his feet and about 3 seconds from passing out. "He's Rowan Hale. Morrison sold him a fake deed to land he didn't own. then triggered an avalanche to kill him when a real assay found silver on the property. The marshal picked up the documents, started reading. His expression didn't change, but his jaw got tighter with each page. "This is serious," he said finally. "No kidding. You understand what you're claiming? Morrison's a powerful man. Lot of friends in this territory. I understand he killed my daughter, killed dozens of other people, and he's about to kill us if you don't do something." Mara's voice was steel. "So what's it going to be, Marshal? You going to uphold the law, or are you one of Morrison's friends?" The marshal looked at her for a long moment. Then he turned to his deputy. "Lock the doors, nobody in or out without my say. Get Doc Miller here now, and send someone to find Morrison. Tell him we need to discuss some irregularities in property claims." He looked back at Mara. "You just started a war." "Good," she said. Then Rowan collapsed and everything went sideways. Rowan woke up in a bed that wasn't covered in pine needles or ash. The ceiling above him was plaster, not sky. Someone had cleaned him up, put him in clothes that didn't smell like smoke and death. His leg was wrapped in proper bandages and hurt less than it had in days. He turned his head, saw Mara asleep in a chair next to the bed. She still had the knife on her belt, still had one hand on the documents, but she was asleep. Really asleep. First time since he'd met her. "She's been there for 2 days, a voice said. Rowan looked toward the door. The marshal was standing there, arms crossed. 2 days? Rowan's voice came out like gravel. "You've been out for 3. Doc says you're lucky to be alive. Infection that bad should have killed you." The marshal came into the room. "Your friend wouldn't let him take the leg. Said you needed it for walking. Threatened him with the knife when he argued." "That sounds like her." "She also wouldn't leave, not even to sleep. Deputy had to bring her food." The marshal pulled up another chair. "She told me everything. What Morrison did to her family, what he did to you, what you survived getting here." "The documents?" "Being verified, but they look legitimate. Morrison's signature. Assay reports showing major silver deposits. Transfer papers that don't match the official county records." The marshal's expression was grim. "If this holds up, it's not just fraud. It's conspiracy, racketeering, and possibly multiple counts of murder." "Where's Morrison now?" "In custody, screaming about false accusations and demanding his lawyer." The marshal leaned back. "But here's the thing. Documents are one thing. Testimony is another. You two willing to testify? In court? With Morrison's lawyers trying to tear you apart?" "Yeah." The answer came from Mara. She was awake now, eyes clear despite the exhaustion. "We'll testify. We'll answer every question. We'll stand in that courtroom and tell everyone what he did. It won't be easy. Nothing worth doing is." She stood, moved to the bed, looked down at Rowan. "You alive?" "Mostly." "Good. Because the real fight's about to start." The marshal was right about the fight. It started the moment word got out that Morrison was in custody, and 2 survivors had evidence linking him to fraud and murder. Within 24 hours of Rowan waking up, 3 men in expensive suits arrived at the marshal's office demanding to see their client. Within 48 hours, the territorial governor's office sent a representative asking pointed questions about the validity of the evidence. Within 3 days, someone tried to burn down the building where Mara was staying. They caught the arsonist before he could finish the job. Turned out he worked for one of Morrison's mining operations. Couldn't afford a lawyer. Took a deal within an hour and named Morrison as the one who'd hired him. The marshal added attempted murder to the charges. Morrison's lawyers screamed that it was hearsay. The judge disagreed. Bail was denied. Rowan watched all this unfold from a hospital bed, legs still wrapped and elevated, ribs still making every breath an adventure. The doctor, Miller, a thin man with kind eyes and hands that had seen too much, checked on him twice a day and kept threatening to amputate if the infection came back. "You're healing," Miller said on day 5, unwrapping the bandages to inspect the wound. "Slowly, badly, but healing." "That's the nicest thing anyone said to me all week." "Don't let it go to your head. You're still one bad decision away from sepsis." Miller rewrapped the leg with practiced efficiency. "Your friend probably saved your life. That field surgery she did was crude but effective. She's good at keeping people alive who should be dead." "So I've heard." Miller paused, hands still on the bandage. "The things Morrison did to her family. Is it all true? Every word. Miller's jaw tightened. I was practicing here 5 years ago. Remember when she came in after the fire? She was carrying her daughter. The girl was already gone, but Mara wouldn't accept it. Kept begging me to do something, anything. He finished the rap, sat back. I've never felt more useless in my life. Rowan didn't know what to say to that. Some wounds didn't have words that fit. She deserved justice, Miller said quietly. That little girl deserves justice. If there's anything I can do to help make that happen, you let me know. Keep me alive long enough to testify. That'll be enough. Miller nodded, gathered his supplies. The preliminary hearing is in 4 days. Judge wants to determine if there's enough evidence to go to trial. You'll need to be there. I'll be there. You can barely walk. Then I'll crawl, but I'll be there. Mara came to visit that afternoon. She looked better than she had. Someone had found her clean clothes, and she'd actually slept in a real bed for the first time in years. But her eyes still had that hard edge that said she was waiting for the next attack. Morrison's lawyers are filing motions, she said without preamble, trying to get the evidence suppressed, claiming we obtained it illegally. We found it in an avalanche site. How is that illegal? They're saying it was planted, that we fabricated everything to frame an innocent man. She pulled up the chair next to his bed, sat like she was ready to bolt at any second. They're good, really good. The kind of lawyers that make witnesses disappear. Literally? Sometimes. She looked at him. You sure you want to do this? There's still time to back out. Take whatever deal they offer and walk away. What about you? I'm not walking away. Can't. This is personal. Her hands clenched into fists. But you didn't know my daughter. Don't owe her anything. You could leave. Could. Won't. Rowan shifted, trying to find a position that didn't make his ribs scream. You dug me out of the snow, kept me alive when dying would have been easier. That makes it personal for me, too. That's stupid. Probably. But I spent the last 6 months running from my guilt about my brother. Hiding in the mountains like being alone would somehow make it hurt less. He met her eyes. Didn't work. All it did was give me time to think about how I quit instead of fighting. This time, I'm fighting. Mara was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached out, squeezed his hand, quick, brief, but real. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Haven't testified. You're here. That's enough. She stood, moved to the window, looked out at Helena spread across the valley. I've been thinking about what happens after. After what? After the trial. After Morrison gets what's coming to him. She didn't turn around. My cabin's gone. They burned it. The marshal got word yesterday. Whole homestead reduced to ash. The words landed like stones. Rowan knew what that cabin meant to her. The life she'd built. The only thing that was hers. I'm sorry. Don't be. It was just wood and nails. But her voice said otherwise. Everything I had from before, Emma's drawings, my husband's tools, the few photographs, all of it gone. Mara, it's fine. I'm fine. She turned back, and her face was composed again. Locked down. Just means I have less to lose now. Makes the fight easier. The preliminary hearing happened in a courtroom that smelled like old wood and older paper. Rowan sat in the front row, leg propped on a chair the bailiff had brought out. Mara beside him looking like she was carved from stone. Morrison sat at the defense table with his 3 lawyers, looking confident. Too confident. Like he knew something they didn't. The judge was a woman named Catherine Hartwell, 60 if she was a day, with iron gray hair and eyes that suggested she'd heard every lie ever told and wasn't impressed by any of them. She listened to the prosecutor lay out the evidence for 30 minutes without interrupting. Then Morrison's lead counsel stood up. His name was Jeremiah Blackwood, and he had a reputation that preceded him. Never lost a case. Never even came close. Your Honor, this entire proceeding is a farce built on fabricated evidence and the testimony of criminals. Blackwood's voice was smooth, practiced. Thomas Morrison is a respected businessman, a pillar of this community. The idea that he would risk everything for a minor land claim is absurd. The land claim contains a silver deposit worth millions, the prosecutor countered. Hardly minor. Allegedly contained silver. The only assay report presented shows my client's company performed the survey legally and properly. What we have here is two desperate people. One, a known troublemaker with a grudge. The other, a recluse with no credibility, trying to extort money from a successful man. Mara's hand clenched on the armrest. Rowan put his hand over hers, steady. They'd known this was coming. Furthermore, Blackwood continued, the deed Miss Voss presents as evidence was found in highly suspicious circumstances. She admits to entering a disaster site without authorization, to removing documents without reporting them. For all we know, she planted those documents herself. That's a lie, Mara said. Not loud. But the courtroom went quiet anyway. Judge Hartwell looked at her. Miss Voss, you'll have your chance to speak. With respect, Your Honor, every second we waste is another second. Morrison's people have to destroy real evidence, to intimidate witnesses, to make more people disappear. Mara stood. I found those documents in an avalanche site. An avalanche that was triggered deliberately to kill Mr. Hale. Morrison's signature is on every page. The essay report predates the sale of the land. The numbers match exactly with county records that Morrison thought were destroyed in a convenient fire last year. Speculation, Blackwood said. Conspiracy theories from a woman with a documented history of making false accusations. My accusations weren't false. Your client killed my daughter. Your daughter died in a tragic accident. My client was never charged, never even investigated, because there was no evidence. Blackwood's voice got harder. Just like there's no evidence now. Just a desperate woman and a man she's manipulated into supporting her delusions. Rowan stood. His legs screamed, but he stayed upright through sheer stubbornness. I was buried alive. Someone triggered that avalanche deliberately. The documents prove Morrison had motive and means. The documents prove nothing except that you two are good at forgery. Blackwood turned to the judge. Your Honor, I move to dismiss all charges. There's no credible evidence. No witnesses except the accusers themselves. No physical proof linking my client to any crime. Judge Hartwell looked at the prosecutor. Response? We have the documents, Your Honor. We have expert testimony that the signatures are authentic. We have county records showing discrepancies in land transfers. We have the arsonist who named Morrison as the one who hired him. A man facing serious charges who was offered a deal to testify. Hardly credible. Blackwood smiled. Your Honor, this is a waste of the court's time and an assault on my client's reputation. I ask that you dismiss immediately and consider sanctions against Miss Voss for bringing false charges. The courtroom went dead quiet. Judge Hartwell sat back, fingers steepled, eyes moving between the prosecutor, Morrison, and Mara. The silence stretched out long enough that Rowan started to worry. Then Hartwell spoke. Mr. Blackwood, you make compelling arguments. The evidence is circumstantial at best. The witnesses have credibility issues. A lesser judge might dismiss. Mara's hand tightened on Rowan's. This was it. They were going to lose. However, Hartwell continued, I've been on this bench for 20 years. I've seen a lot of cases, a lot of criminals, and I've learned that the truth has a certain smell to it. So does a lie. She looked at Morrison. Mr. Morrison, you've been very quiet. Do you have anything to say? Morrison stood, smooth, confident. Your Honor, I'm a victim here. These people have slandered my name, disrupted my business, and created a circus atmosphere that damages the entire community. I've done nothing wrong. Nothing wrong, Hartwell repeated. You sold land you didn't own? I sold land my company had legal title to. The deed is filed with the county. The deed Miss Voss has shows prior ownership. Forged, obviously. The signature matches yours exactly. We've had experts verify it. Then someone traced it. I'm not the first successful man to be targeted by fraudsters. Morrison's smile was sympathetic. Understanding. The kind of smile that made you want to believe him. Your Honor, I understand these people have suffered. Miss Voss lost her family in a terrible accident. Mr. Hale was caught in an avalanche. They're looking for someone to blame. I'm simply the convenient target. Mara made a sound like she'd been punched. Rowan grabbed her arm before she could lunge forward. Judge Hartwell watched the exchange. Then she picked up the documents, studied them for a long moment. I'm not dismissing the charges. Blackwood's confident expression cracked, just for a second. Your Honor, I'm not dismissing them because the evidence, while circumstantial, is substantial, and because this court has a duty to investigate serious allegations thoroughly. She set the documents down. Trial is set for 6 weeks from today. Mr. Morrison will remain in custody without bail given the severity of the charges and the risk of witness intimidation. Your Honor, that's outrageous. What's outrageous, Mr. Blackwood, is that 2 people nearly died getting to this courtroom, and you're treating it like an inconvenience. Hartwell's voice went cold. Your client will get a fair trial, but he'll wait in a cell while we prepare for it. This hearing is adjourned. She stood. Everyone stood, and then it was over. Morrison's lawyers immediately surrounded him, voices raised. The prosecutor was gathering documents, already looking stressed about what the next 6 weeks would bring. Mara just stood there, swaying slightly, like she couldn't quite believe it. We won, Rowan said quietly. We didn't lose. That's different. But there was something like relief in her voice. 6 weeks. We have to survive 6 weeks. The marshal appeared at their side. You'll be under protective custody until the trial, both of you. I've got a safe house set up outside town, armed guards. Nobody gets in without authorization. A safe house, Mara repeated, like a prison, like protection. The marshal's voice was firm. Morrison's people just watched their boss get denied bail. They're going to be desperate, angry. You two need to be somewhere they can't reach you. What about finding other victims? Rowan asked. Building the case? That's the prosecutor's job now. Yours is staying alive to testify. The marshal gestured toward the door. Come on, let's get you somewhere secure before Morrison's friends decide to make a statement. The safe house was a farmhouse 20 miles outside Helena. Old, sturdy, surrounded by open land that made sneaking up on it impossible. 2 deputies stationed outside, 1 inside, all of them armed and looking like they took their job seriously. Mara hated it immediately. I can't stay here, she said, standing in the middle of the main room like she was ready to bolt. 6 weeks locked up. I'll go crazy. You'll go dead if you don't, the marshal said. Morrison's not going to take this lying down. He's already lost control of the narrative. Next step is making sure you can't testify. Let him try. Mara. Rowan lowered himself into a chair, leg throbbing. We didn't make it this far to get killed now. 6 weeks. We can do 6 weeks. You can. You're used to hiding. The words came out harsh, and immediately her face showed regret. Sorry, that was true. Rowan shrugged. I've been hiding for 6 months. Another 6 weeks won't kill me, but you're right. You're not built for it. The marshal looked between them. This isn't negotiable. You stay here or you lose protective custody. Your choice. Mara's jaw worked. Then she nodded. Once, sharp. Fine, 6 weeks, but I want books and paper and something to do besides stare at walls. I'll arrange it. The marshal headed for the door, paused. For what it's worth, you did good today. Morrison thought he could make this go away with lawyers and money. You proved him wrong. After he left, Mara and Rowan sat in silence. The house was quiet except for the wind outside and the occasional murmur of the deputies talking. I keep waiting for it to feel real, Mara said finally. The trial, the chance to make him pay. It doesn't feel real yet. Maybe it won't until we're sitting in that courtroom watching him get sentenced. If we get that far, a lot can happen in 6 weeks. She moved to the window, looked out at the empty land. They could find a way to suppress the evidence, intimidate the jury, buy the judge. Hartwell doesn't seem like the type to be bought. Everyone has a price, or a weakness. Morrison's had years to learn how to exploit both. She turned back, and her expression was haunted. When they came for my family, they didn't just burn the cabin. They made sure everyone knew what happens to people who fight back. Other families on disputed claims took settlements and left. Nobody wanted to end up like us. This time is different. How? This time Morrison's in a cell. This time we have evidence. This time the law is actually paying attention. Rowan shifted, trying to ease the pressure on his leg. This time you're not alone. Mara looked at him for a long moment. Then she came over, sat in the chair across from him. Why are you doing this? Really? And don't tell me it's about guilt over your brother. That's part of it, but not all of it. Rowan thought about that. About Danny and the tunnel collapse and 6 months of isolation that hadn't made anything better. about being buried alive and waking up to find someone had cared enough to dig him out, about watching Mara drag him across 80 miles of winter hell because giving up wasn't in her vocabulary. "Maybe I'm tired of running," he said finally. "Maybe I want to see if I'm still the kind of person who can stand up for something. Or maybe I just don't want to watch Morrison destroy another person the way he destroyed you and still walk away clean." He met her eyes. "Take your pick. They're all true." "You barely know me." "I know enough. I know you saved my life. I know you lost everything and kept going. I know you're the strongest person I've ever met, and you don't even realize it." He paused. "And I know that if our positions were reversed, you'd do this for me." Mara's throat worked. She looked away, blinking hard. "Emma would have liked you. She collected people like you, the ones who tried to do the right thing even when it was hard. She sounds like she was a good kid." "She was. Smart, stubborn, laughed at everything." Mara's voice cracked. "She used to wake me up before dawn to watch the sunrise. Said it was the best part of the day because nobody had ruined it yet." "I'm sorry she didn't get more sunrises." "Me too." Mara wiped her eyes roughly. "But maybe this trial gives her something. Not justice. Nothing can give her that. But maybe acknowledgement. Maybe her name on record saying she mattered, that she existed, that what happened to her wasn't just an accident to be forgotten. Her name will be on record. I'll make sure of it." They sat like that as afternoon faded to evening. The deputies changed shifts. Someone brought food that neither of them had much appetite for. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling windows and reminding them that winter wasn't done yet. 3 days into protective custody, the prosecutor came to visit. Her name was Sarah Chen, and she looked like she hadn't slept since the hearing. She spread documents across the kitchen table and got right to business. "We found 6 other families with similar situations. Land claims that Morrison's company suddenly owned after convenient accidents or fires. People who took settlements and left rather than fight." Chen's finger traced a map showing the properties. "All of them within 20 miles of your cabin, Mara. All of them in the last 7 years." "That's a pattern," Rowan said. "It's a start. Problem is, most of the families are long gone, scattered across the territory. One couple died in a house fire last year. 2 others refused to talk to us. They're scared." "Can you compel them?" "Maybe, but scared witnesses make bad testimony. Morrison's lawyers will tear them apart." Chen pulled out another document. "The arsonist who tried to burn your building, he's recanted, says he was coerced into naming Morrison, claims he acted alone." Mara's hands clenched. "Someone got to him." "Obviously. He's in protective custody, but that doesn't mean much if he's already been threatened." Chen rubbed her face. "We're fighting an uphill battle here. Morrison has resources we can't match. Every day his lawyers file new motions. Every day they find new ways to delay or discredit." "What about the assay reports?" Rowan asked. "The signatures?" "Experts confirm they're authentic. But Blackwood's bringing in his own experts who'll say the opposite. It'll come down to who the jury believes." Chen looked at them both. "Which means your testimony is critical. You two are the only witnesses who can tie everything together. The avalanche, the documents, the pattern of intimidation. We'll testify. I know you will, but I need you to understand what you're up against. Blackwood will make you look like criminals, liars, people with grudges and nothing to lose." She pointed at Mara. "He'll bring up your past accusations. The fact that you were investigated and nothing came of it, paint you as someone with a vendetta. Let him try. He will try, and he's very good at it." Chen's voice softened. "I'm not saying this to scare you. I'm saying it so you're prepared. This trial is going to be brutal, personal. They'll dig up every mistake you've ever made and use it against you." "I don't care," Mara said. "They can drag me through whatever they want, as long as Morrison ends up in prison. That's the goal. But I need you both to understand, there's a real chance we lose. Evidence gets suppressed. Jury doesn't believe us. Judge makes a bad ruling. Morrison walks." Chen gathered her documents. "I'm doing everything I can, but this isn't a sure thing." After she left, Mara paced the kitchen like a caged animal. Rowan watched her make the circuit 3 times before speaking. "We knew this wouldn't be easy. Knowing and hearing it are different things." She stopped at the window, stared out at nothing. "What if we go through all this and he still wins? What then?" "Then we tried. That's more than most people do. Trying doesn't bring Emma back. Trying doesn't give me those 5 years I spent hiding. Her voice was raw. Trying just means I failed louder. Or it means you refuse to let him silence you. That counts for something. Does it? She turned to face him. My daughter's dead. My husband's dead. My home's ashes. I've got nothing left except the chance to watch the man who destroyed everything sit in a courtroom and lie about it while expensive lawyers make me look like I'm crazy. Rowan stood, leg protesting but holding, across the room until he was standing in front of her. You've got more than that. You've got proof. You've got witnesses. You've got a prosecutor who believes you. You've got a judge who isn't bought. And you've got me. You're one man with a broken leg and guilt issues. Yeah, but I'm here, and I'm not leaving. He met her eyes. You saved my life, multiple times. Let me help save yours. Even if that just means standing next to you when Blackwood tries to tear you apart. Mara's face crumpled, just for a second. Then she pulled it back together with visible effort. I don't know how to do this. How to hope. I spent 5 years making sure I never hoped for anything again, because hope just meant more pain when it got taken away. Then don't hope. Just keep moving forward, one day at a time, like we did in the mountains. He squeezed her shoulder. We made it 80 miles through winter hell. We can make it 6 weeks in a farmhouse. She laughed, wet, broken, but real. You're an idiot. Takes one to know one. The weeks crawled by. Chen visited twice more with updates that were mostly bad. Morrison's lawyers had gotten 3 of the other families to sign affidavits saying they'd never been threatened. The expert testimony on the signatures was now split 3-2 in Morrison's favor. 2 potential witnesses had suddenly left the territory with no forwarding address. The trial date got moved once, then twice, Blackwood filing motion after motion claiming he needed more time to prepare. Judge Hartwell denied most of them, but the delays added up anyway. Rowan's leg healed slowly. He could walk without the crutch now, though he still limped and probably always would. The ribs stopped grinding with every breath. The fever dreams faded. He felt almost human again. Mara didn't heal, not in ways you could see with bandages. She grew quieter as the trial approached, more withdrawn, spending hours staring out windows or reading the same pages of books over and over without absorbing them. The deputies tried to make conversation. Rowan tried to draw her out. Nothing worked. 2 days before the trial, she finally broke. I can't do this, she said. They were sitting at the kitchen table, Rowan reviewing his testimony, Mara pushing food around her plate. I thought I could, but I can't. Yes, you can. No, you don't understand. Sitting in that courtroom, looking at Morrison, listening to him lie about Emma, about what he did. Her hands were shaking. I'll kill him. I'll stand up and I'll kill him with my bare hands. And then we lose everything. You won't. You don't know that. I do. Because you're stronger than your rage. You proved that already. Rowan reached across the table, took her hands. You could have killed those men who were hunting us. Instead, you hid. You outweighted them. Because you knew getting to Helena was more important than revenge. This is different. How? Because this time he'll be right there, close enough to touch, close enough to hurt. Her voice broke. And I won't be able to. The law will protect him. Guards will protect him. And I'll just have to sit there and take it while he smirks. Rowan understood the helplessness, the fury with nowhere to go. He'd felt it watching his brother's casket get lowered into the ground. Felt it every time someone had told him it wasn't his fault when he knew it was. Then use it, he said. What? The rage, the pain, use it. When you testify, when you tell the jury what he did, let them see it. Let them see what he took from you. That's not weakness. That's truth. He squeezed her hands. Morrison's counting on you breaking, on you losing control. Don't give him that. Show the jury who you really are. A mother who lost her child. A woman who survived when she shouldn't have. Someone who spent 5 years in hell and came back anyway because justice mattered more than safety. Mara stared at him. Then slowly, something shifted in her expression. The despair pulling back. Not gone, but contained, controlled. Okay, she said quietly. Okay, I can do that. I know you can. And if I can't, if I see him and I lose it anyway, then I'll be sitting right behind you and I'll remind you why we're here. why we survived, why it matters. He smiled. We made it 80 miles. We can make it through one trial. The night before the trial, neither of them slept. They sat in the main room, fire burning low, watching the hours tick by. Outside, the deputies changed shifts. Inside, two people who'd started as strangers prepared to face the man who'd tried to kill them both. Whatever happens tomorrow, Mara said as dawn started to break. Thank you for being here, for giving a damn, for not letting me face this alone. You'd do the same for me. Yeah, I would. She stood, moved to the window, watched the sun come up. Emma would have liked this sunrise. Nobody's ruined it yet. Rowan came to stand beside her. They watched the light spread across the valley, turning everything gold and pink and full of possibility. For a moment, just a moment, it felt like maybe they could win this. Maybe justice wasn't just a word. Maybe the fight was worth it. Then the deputies came to tell them it was time to go, and the moment passed. But Rowan held on to it anyway. Because hope, even fragile hope, was better than giving up. And they'd come too far to give up now. The courtroom was packed, every seat filled, people standing in the back, press with their notebooks ready. Rowan limped in through the side entrance, flanked by deputies, and the crowd noise dropped to whispers. He could feel eyes on him, judging, wondering if he was the hero or the fool. Mara came in next, and the whispers got louder. She walked like she was heading into battle, spine straight, hands steady despite what Rowan knew was churning underneath. She sat at the prosecution table without looking at Morrison. Rowan took his seat directly behind her, close enough to reach if she needed him. Morrison entered last, flanked by Blackwood and his team of expensive suits. He looked good, rested, confident, like a man who'd already won and was just going through the formalities. When he sat down, he glanced back at Mara. Just once. A small smile on his face. Rowan saw Mara's hands clench under the table, saw her take a breath. Hold it. Let it out slow. Judge Hartwell took the bench and brought the room to order with one look. We're here for the trial of Thomas Morrison on charges of fraud, conspiracy to commit murder, and racketeering. Jury's been selected. Opening statements will begin shortly. She looked at both tables. I expect professional conduct from everyone. This is a court of law, not a circus. Understood? Both sides nodded. The jury filed in. 12 people who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. Rowan didn't blame them. This trial was going to get ugly. Chen stood for the prosecution's opening. She was good, laid out the evidence clearly. The fake deeds, the assay reports, the pattern of families losing land after convenient accidents. She spoke about Emma without theatrics, just facts. A 6-year-old girl who died in a fire that shouldn't have happened. Then Blackwood stood up and everything Chen had built started to crack. Ladies and gentlemen, this case is a tragedy, but not for the reasons the prosecution claims. Blackwood's voice filled the courtroom, smooth, authoritative, the voice of reason. The tragedy is that grief-stricken people have been manipulated into believing that their pain must be someone else's fault, that accidents are somehow crimes, that a successful businessman must be a criminal simply because he's successful. He paced, gestured, made eye contact with each juror. Thomas Morrison built his company from nothing. He's provided jobs for hundreds of families, paid his taxes, followed the law. And for that, he's being persecuted by people who want to blame him for acts of nature and their own poor decisions. Mara's jaw was so tight, Rowan could hear her teeth grinding. The prosecution will show you documents. They'll claim these documents prove fraud. But what they won't tell you is that these documents were found under suspicious circumstances by someone with a documented history of making false accusations against my client. Blackwood pointed at Mara. Mara Voss has spent 5 years telling anyone who would listen that Thomas Morrison killed her daughter. The authorities investigated, found nothing, because there was nothing to find. This trial is simply her latest attempt to make someone pay for an accident that was no one's fault. That's a lie, Mara said, quiet but clear. Hartwell's gavel came down. Miss Voss, you'll have your chance to speak. Blackwood smiled. You see, this is what we're dealing with. Someone so consumed by grief and anger that she can't accept the truth. Someone who's willing to drag an innocent man through court to satisfy her need for revenge. He turned back to the jury. By the end of this trial, you'll see that the only crime here is the character assassination of a good man. And I trust you'll deliver the only verdict that makes sense. Not guilty. He sat down to murmurs from the crowd. Rowan wanted to punch him, wanted to stand up and shout that everything he'd said was calculated poison. But this was a courtroom. There were rules, and they had to follow them even when Morrison's side was playing dirty. The prosecution called its first witness, an expert on document authentication who testified that Morrison's signatures on the deed and assay reports were genuine. Blackwood cross-examined and got him to admit that signatures could be traced, could be forged by skilled hands. That authentication wasn't absolute. The second witness was a county clerk who testified about missing records, files that should have existed but didn't, transfer papers that had vanished in a convenient fire. Blackwood got her to admit the fire was ruled accidental, that missing records happened all the time, that there was no proof Morrison had anything to do with it. By the end of day one, Rowan could see the jury starting to doubt. Blackwood was good, really good. He was planting seeds, making the prosecution's case look circumstantial, questionable, built on assumptions rather than facts. "He's winning," Mara said that night back at the safe house. She was pacing again, wound tight. "Did you see the jury? They're believing him. It's the first day. It's a disaster. Chen's witnesses aren't strong enough. Blackwood's making them look incompetent." She stopped at the window, stared out at darkness. "We're going to lose. We haven't testified yet. You think our word will be enough? Against his lawyers? Against his reputation?" She laughed, bitter. "I'm the crazy woman with a grudge. You're the hermit who got buried in an avalanche. Who's going to believe us?" "The jury will, if we tell the truth." Rowan stood, cross to her. "Chen said our testimony is critical, that we're the ones who can tie everything together. So that's what we do. We get on that stand and we tell them exactly what happened. And if they don't believe us, then we lose. But at least we tried. At least we made Morrison sit in that courtroom and hear what he did. Made him face it." Rowan's voice got harder. "Your daughter deserves that. My brother deserves that. All the families he destroyed deserve that. So we get up there and we fight. Because that's what we do. It's what we've been doing since you dug me out of the snow." Mara turned to look at him. Her eyes were wet, but her jaw was set. Okay. We fight." Day 2 brought more witnesses. A geologist who testified about silver deposits and their value. A mining expert who explained how avalanches could be triggered artificially. Both were solid. Both got torn apart on cross-examination. Blackwood made the geologist admit he'd never actually visited the site. Made the mining expert admit that proving an avalanche was artificial versus natural was nearly impossible without physical evidence. Day 3 was when Chen called Rowan to the stand. He limped up there, aware of every eye in the room. The bailiff swore him in. Chen approached with an encouraging smile that didn't quite hide her stress. "Mr. Hale, can you tell the court how you came to own the property in question?" "I bought it from a man named Cartwright, paid cash. Had a lawyer handle the paperwork. Everything seemed legitimate." "And what happened after you took possession?" Rowan told it all, moving to the cabin, working the claim. The avalanche that came out of nowhere and buried him alive. Waking up under tons of ice and timber. Mara digging him out, finding the documents that proved the land wasn't really his. "When you saw those documents, what did you think?" "I thought someone had set me up, sold me land they didn't own, then tried to kill me when I might have discovered the silver." He looked at Morrison. "I thought I'd been played by professionals." Blackwood stood for cross-examination, and his whole demeanor changed, friendly, almost sympathetic. "Mr. Hale, you've been through quite an ordeal, buried alive, terrible injuries. I imagine that would affect anyone's memory, their perception." "My memory's fine." "Is it? You testified you were unconscious for extended periods, that you had a fever, that you were taking pain medication." Blackwood's voice was gentle, understanding. "Couldn't those factors have affected your recollection of events? I know what I saw, but you saw it through the lens of trauma, of physical suffering, of someone telling you what to think." Blackwood glanced at Mara. "Miss Voss found you, saved you, kept you alive. You must feel quite indebted to her." "I'm grateful, yeah. Grateful enough to support her accusations even if they're not true." "They are true." "Are they? Or are they what Miss Voss convinced you to believe while you were delirious and dependent on her for survival?" Blackwood's voice got firmer. "Mister, Hale, isn't it possible that you've constructed a narrative to make sense of your accident? That you're looking for someone to blame because accepting it was just bad luck is too difficult? Rowan's hands clenched on the witness stand rail. No, that's not what happened. You were a mine supervisor before you came to Montana. Your brother died in a tunnel collapse. You blamed yourself for that, didn't you? Chen was on her feet. Objection. Relevance. Goes to the witness's state of mind, Your Honor. His pattern of assigning blame where none exists. Hartwell considered. I'll allow it. Answer the question, Mr. Hale. Rowan's throat was tight. Yes, I blame myself. Because you made a call that resulted in his death. It was an accident. But you couldn't accept that. You needed it to be someone's fault. Specifically, your fault. Blackwood moved closer. Isn't it possible you're doing the same thing now? Making this avalanche into a conspiracy because you can't accept that sometimes terrible things just happen? The documents could have been planted, could have been forged, could have been found exactly where Miss Voss said, but mean nothing about my client's involvement. Blackwood's voice was almost kind now, pitying. Mr. Hale, I think you're a man who's suffered greatly, who's looking for meaning in that suffering. But that doesn't make my client guilty. Rowan wanted to scream, wanted to punch through Blackwood's sympathetic facade and make him see the truth. But he couldn't. This wasn't the mountains. This was a courtroom, and he was losing. When he stepped down, Mara's face told him she knew it too. Blackwood had made him look unreliable, traumatized. A man seeing conspiracies where there were only accidents. Chen tried to recover with redirect, but the damage was done. The jury looked at Rowan differently now, not as a victim, as someone who might be mistaken, well-meaning but wrong. That night, Mara barely spoke. She sat at the kitchen table staring at nothing while Rowan replayed every answer he'd given, trying to figure out where he'd lost control. It's not your fault, she said finally. Blackwood's a professional. That's what he does. I should have been stronger, better prepared. You told the truth. That's all you could do. She looked at him. Tomorrow's my turn. He's going to tear me apart worse than he did you. We both know it. You'll handle it. Will I? Her laugh was hollow. He's going to bring up Emma, my accusations, the fact that I've been living alone in the mountains for 5 years like some kind of crazy hermit. He's going to paint me as obsessed, delusional, someone who can't let go. Then show them who you really are. A mother who lost everything and survived anyway. Someone strong enough to dig a stranger out of an avalanche. Strong enough to walk 80 miles through winter hell to get justice. What if strong isn't enough? Her voice cracked. What if the truth isn't enough? Rowan had no answer for that, because he was starting to wonder the same thing. Day 4. Chen called Mara to the stand. She walked up there like she was walking to her own execution. Steady steps, but Rowan could see the fear underneath. She was sworn in, sat down, folded her hands in her lap to hide the shaking. Chen started gentle, asked about Mara's life before, her husband, her daughter, the small claim they'd worked. Mara answered in a voice that was almost too quiet. The judge had to ask her twice to speak up. Tell the court what happened 5 years ago. Mara took a breath. Men came to our claim, said we didn't own it, had papers showing someone else had prior rights. My husband tried to fight it, legally at first. Then they burned our cabin. Her voice broke. My daughter was inside. Emma. She was 6 years old. Who were these men working for? Thomas Morrison. Mara looked at him for the first time. His company, his orders. Blackwood stood. Objection. The witness has no direct knowledge of my client's involvement. Sustained. Miss Voss, stick to what you know firsthand. Mara's jaw tightened. The men who came. They said they worked for Morrison's company. They had documents with his signature. Did you report this to the authorities? Yes. They investigated. Said there wasn't enough evidence, that the fire was accidental, that my claims about Morrison were unsubstantiated. Her hands clenched. So he walked free, and I lost everything. Chen walked her through the rest. The 5 years alone. Finding Rowan in the avalanche, the documents, the decision to come to Helena. All of it factual, direct, building a picture of someone who'd been wronged and was finally getting the chance to make it right. Then Blackwood stood up and Rowan saw Mara's whole body tense. "Miss Voss, I'm sorry for your loss, truly. Losing a child is unimaginable." Blackwood's voice was all sympathy. "But grief can do strange things to us. Make us see connections that aren't there. Make us need someone to blame. I don't need someone to blame. I know who's responsible. Do you?" The investigation 5 years ago found no evidence linking my client to the fire. The fire marshal ruled it accidental. Yet you persisted in your accusations. Why? Because I know what I saw, what those men said, what you think you saw, what you think they said. Blackwood moved closer. You were in shock, traumatized. You'd just lost your daughter and your home. Your husband was falling apart. Isn't it possible your memory of that day isn't reliable? My memory is fine. Is it? You testified that you've been living alone in the mountains for 5 years. That's a long time to be isolated, to have only your own thoughts for company, to replay events over and over until you're certain of your version. But certainty isn't the same as truth. I know what happened. You know what you believe happened. That's different. Blackwood pulled out a document. This is a psychiatric evaluation from 3 years ago. You were found wandering near town, delusional, talking about conspiracies. The doctor recommended treatment. You refused. Mara's face went white. That was one bad day. I was sick. Hadn't eaten in days. You were talking about Morrison, saying he was trying to kill you, that he had people watching you. Classic paranoid delusions. Blackwood's voice got harder. Miss Voss, isn't it true that you've been obsessed with my client for 5 years? That you've blamed him for everything wrong in your life? That this trial is just another manifestation of that obsession? No, he killed my daughter. The fire marshal says she died in an accident. The fire marshal was wrong, or paid off, or doing his job, coming to an objective conclusion. Unlike you, who spent 5 years constructing an elaborate conspiracy because you can't accept that sometimes terrible things happen and no one's to blame. Blackwood turned to the jury. This woman has suffered. I don't dispute that. But suffering doesn't make her accusations true. It makes her desperate, willing to believe anything that gives her suffering meaning. You don't know anything about my suffering, Mara said. Her voice was shaking now. You didn't hold your child while she died. You didn't watch your husband give up. You didn't spend 5 years alone because everyone thought you were crazy for wanting justice. And you didn't accept that maybe they were right, that maybe you are too close to this, too damaged by it, to see clearly. Blackwood's voice went gentle again, pitying. Miss Voss, I truly hope you find peace, but you won't find it here. My client isn't responsible for your tragedy, and destroying him won't bring your daughter back. Mara stood up, fast. The bailiff moved toward her, but she wasn't going for Morrison. She was just standing there, shaking, tears streaming down her face. He killed her, she said, voice breaking. He killed my baby, and he's going to walk free, and there's nothing I can do about it because no one believes me. No one ever believes me. Hartwell's gavel came down. Miss Voss, sit down. I can't sit here and listen to him make my daughter's death meaningless. Make her into just an accident. She wasn't an accident. She was murdered. Mara was looking at the jury now, desperate. Please believe me. I'm not crazy. I'm not obsessed. I'm just a mother who wants justice for her child. Miss Voss, sit down now or I'll hold you in contempt. Mara sat. But the damage was done. Rowan could see it in the jury's faces. They didn't see a mother seeking justice. They saw a woman who'd broken down, who'd lost control, who maybe was exactly what Blackwood said she was, too damaged to see truth. Chen tried damage control on redirect, got Mara to explain the psychiatric episode, to clarify that she'd been physically ill, not delusional. But it was like trying to stop a flood with a teacup. Blackwood had poisoned the well, and everyone had already drunk from it. When Mara stepped down, she looked destroyed. She walked past Rowan without meeting his eyes and sat at the prosecution table with her head down. The prosecution rested. Blackwood immediately moved for dismissal, claimed the prosecution hadn't met its burden of proof, that the evidence was circumstantial and the witnesses unreliable. Judge Hartwell denied it, but Rowan could tell she was wavering. The defense put on its case. Character witnesses for Morrison, business partners who praised his integrity, community leaders who spoke about his charitable work. Then Morrison himself took the stand. He was perfect, calm, reasonable, answered every question like he was just helping clear up an unfortunate misunderstanding, expressed sympathy for Mara's loss, said he hoped she found peace, denied any involvement in fraud or murder with a straight face and a clear voice. Chen tried to shake him on cross, brought up the signatures on the documents. Morrison said they must be forgeries because he'd never signed those particular papers, brought up the pattern of families losing land. Morrison said mining was a complicated business and sometimes claims were disputed but always resolved legally, brought up the arsonist who'd named him. Morrison said the man was clearly lying to reduce his sentence. For every question Chen asked, Morrison had an answer. Plausible, reasonable, the kind of answers that made sense if you weren't looking too closely. When the defense rested, Rowan knew they were in trouble, real trouble. The jury looked convinced, or at least doubtful enough that conviction wasn't certain. Closing arguments came the next day. Chen was good, passionate. She laid out the evidence again, asked the jury to see the pattern, to connect the dots, to understand that Morrison was exactly what Mara said he was, a man who destroyed families for profit. Then Blackwood stood up and dismantled everything she'd built. Ladies and gentlemen, the prosecution wants you to believe in a vast conspiracy, that my client, a respected businessman, is secretly a murderer who's been operating for years without anyone noticing, that every accident is really a crime, that every coincidence is evidence of guilt. But that's not how the law works. That's not how justice works. He paced, made eye contact. The prosecution has shown you documents that might be fake, witnesses who might be mistaken, accusations from someone who admits to spending 5 years obsessing over my client. That's not evidence. That's wishful thinking. He went on, methodical, thorough, taking apart every piece of the prosecution's case, making it sound flimsy, built on sand, and the jury was eating it up. My client isn't perfect, no one is, but he's not a criminal, he's not a murderer. He's a man who's built a life on hard work and honest dealing, and now he's being destroyed by people who need someone to blame for their pain. Blackwood's voice got solemn. I ask you to see past the emotion, past the tears and accusations. Look at the evidence objectively, and when you do, you'll see there's only one verdict that makes sense, not guilty. He sat down to approving murmurs from Morrison's side of the room. Chen looked like she'd been punched. Mara was staring at the table. Rowan felt something in his chest crack. They were going to lose. The jury got the case at noon, deliberated through the afternoon, came back at 5:30 with a verdict that had taken less than 6 hours. That was bad. Quick verdicts usually meant the jury hadn't struggled with the decision. Has the jury reached a verdict? Judge Hartwell asked. The foreman stood. We have, Your Honor. What say you? On the charge of fraud, we find the defendant not guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder, we find the defendant not guilty. On the charge of racketeering, we find the defendant not guilty. The courtroom erupted. Morrison's lawyers were shaking his hand. Morrison himself looked vindicated. Mara sat frozen, like she'd turned to stone. Hartwell banged her gavel. Order! Order in this court! When it quieted, she turned to Morrison. Mr. Morrison, you're free to go. This court is adjourned. Just like that, it was over. Morrison walked out a free man. Mara sat there like the world had ended, because for her, it had. Rowan reached forward, put his hand on her shoulder. She flinched, didn't look at him. Mara, don't. Her voice was dead. Just don't. She stood, walked out of the courtroom without looking back. Rowan tried to follow, but the crowd was too thick. By the time he got outside, she was gone. The marshal found him an hour later. She's at the safe house. Won't talk to anyone. Won't eat. Just sitting there. Rowan went immediately. Mara was in her room, staring at the wall. He knocked. No answer. Went in anyway. You should go, she said without turning around. Not happening. Why? It's over. We lost. Morrison won. Everything we did. Everything we survived. It was for nothing. It wasn't for nothing. He's walking free, probably celebrating, while my daughter's still dead and her killer gets to go home. Her voice was hollow, broken. You were right to hide in the mountains. Fighting is pointless. The system's rigged. Money wins. Power wins. People like us just get crushed. Rowan sat on the edge of the bed. You don't believe that. I do now. No, you don't. Because if you believed that, you wouldn't have dug me out of the snow, wouldn't have dragged me 80 miles, wouldn't have risked your life to get here. You fought because you believe justice matters, that truth matters. One verdict doesn't change that. It changes everything. Finally, she turned to look at him. Her face was ravaged, eyes empty. I had one chance, one shot at making him pay, and I failed. Emma deserved better. She deserved justice, and I couldn't give it to her. You gave her something else. You gave her a voice. You made sure people heard what happened to her, made sure it's on record. That matters. It doesn't bring her back. No, nothing will. But it means she wasn't forgotten, that she mattered, that what Morrison did to her mattered. Rowan reached out, took her hand. She didn't pull away. You're right that we lost the trial. Morrison's walking free, and that's wrong. But you're still here, still standing. After everything he did to destroy you, you're still here. That's not nothing. It feels like nothing. I know, but it's not. He squeezed her hand. Morrison won the trial, but he didn't win everything. You're alive. I'm alive. We testified. We told the truth. Sometimes that's all you can do. Mara was quiet for a long time. Then, what happens now? I don't know, but we figure it out together. You don't owe me anything anymore. I saved your life. You helped me get here. We're even. This isn't about being even. This is about not giving up, about deciding what comes next. Rowan's voice got firmer. Morrison took everything from you, your family, your home, your peace. Are you going to let him take your future too? Let him win completely? What future? I've got nothing. You've got breath in your lungs, strength in your hands, the ability to build something new. That's not nothing. He paused. Your cabin's gone, but land is still land. You could rebuild. With what money? What resources? I'm broke, homeless. The trial cost everything I had left. So we start over, both of us. The idea was forming even as he spoke. That silver deposit Morrison wanted. It's still there. And now that the trial's over, the real deed questions are going to come up. County's going to have to sort out who actually owns that land. Could be you, could be me, could be someone else entirely. But whoever ends up with it is sitting on a fortune. You think the county will give it to us after we lost the trial? I think the trial was criminal. The deed question is civil. Different standards, different evidence. And now Morrison's lawyers can't claim we're making things up. There's a court record, testimony, documents. Even if the jury didn't convict, the evidence exists. Rowan stood, paced. We get a good property lawyer, someone who specializes in disputed claims. We fight for what's actually ours. More fighting, more courts, more lawyers. Mara shook her head. I can't. I don't have it in me. Then rest first. Recover. Let me handle the initial part. When you're ready, you join in. He stopped pacing, looked at her. I'm not saying this will be easy, or quick, or certain, but it's a chance. And after everything we've survived, don't we owe it to ourselves to take one more chance? She looked at him for a long moment, really looked at him, seeing not just the man she'd saved, but maybe something else. A partner. Someone who'd stood by her through the worst and was still standing. One more chance, she said finally. Barely a whisper. But if this doesn't work, if it doesn't work, we'll figure something else out. But we do it together. Deal? Deal. It took 3 months. 3 months of lawyers and hearings and depositions and more paperwork than Rowan thought existed in the world. But slowly, piece by piece, they built a case that the original deed Mara had found was legitimate, that Morrison's company had fraudulently claimed the land, that the county sale to Rowan was invalid because Morrison hadn't actually owned the property to sell. The county fought it. Morrison's company fought it harder, but without criminal charges hanging over it, the property dispute was just business, and the evidence was clear enough that eventually the judge ruled in their favor. The land belonged to the original deed holder, which meant it belonged to Mara. Morrison tried to appeal, filed motion after motion, but the ruling stood. And when a major mining company approached Mara about buying the claim, the silver deposit alone worth more than she'd see in 10 lifetimes, she had leverage for the first time since Emma died. She negotiated hard, got not just money, but terms. The mining company would have to follow strict environmental protocols, employ local workers, contribute to a fund for families who'd lost land to disputed claims. She named the fund after Emma, made sure her daughter's name would be attached to something good instead of just tragedy. The settlement came through on a cold afternoon in early spring. Enough money to rebuild, to start over, to create something new from the ashes of everything Morrison had destroyed. Mara stood outside what used to be her cabin, still just ashes and scorched earth, and looked at the check in her hands like she couldn't quite believe it was real. "What are you going to do?" Rowan asked. He was standing beside her, legs still not perfect but functional, scars from the avalanche fading but never gone. "Build," she said, "not a cabin. Something bigger. A place for people who've lost everything, who need somewhere to recover, to heal, to figure out what comes next." She looked at him. "You could help. If you wanted." "What would I do?" "Whatever needs doing. Building, planning, managing. Being someone who understands what it's like to lose everything and survive anyway." She paused. "And maybe staying, if you want to." Rowan thought about the last 6 months, about being buried alive and dug out, about winter mountains and forest fires and a trial that had torn them both apart, about this woman who'd saved his life and then let him help save hers, about the fact that somewhere in all that, hiding had stopped being an option and fighting had started being necessary. "Yeah," he said, "I want to stay." They built through the spring and summer, not just a house, but a complex. Cabins for families who needed refuge, a main building for meals and meetings, gardens, a workshop. Space for healing that wasn't just physical, but emotional, mental. The kind of healing that came from being around people who understood. Word spread. Families started coming, people who'd lost land to Morrison, or others like him. People who'd been broken by systems that didn't care about them. People who needed proof that starting over was possible. Mara ran it with the same fierce determination she'd used to survive 5 years alone. But now that determination had direction. Purpose. She hired staff who'd been through their own versions of hell, created programs that actually helped instead of just warehousing people, made it clear that this place was about building new lives, not hiding from old ones. Rowan helped with everything. He was good at building, good at talking to people who'd given up and needed someone to tell them they could keep going, good at being the kind of person who'd survived the unsurvivable and could show others it was possible. Morrison tried one more time to cause trouble, sent lawyers claiming the settlement was obtained through fraud, but this time Mara had resources, had lawyers of her own. The case got dismissed within a month and Morrison finally gave up. Went back to his business, still successful, still powerful, still unpunished for what he'd done. That part still hurt, probably always would, but Mara had learned something over the last year. That justice wasn't always about courts and verdicts. Sometimes it was about surviving despite everything, about taking what was meant to destroy you and building something better from the rubble, about refusing to let the people who hurt you define who you became. A year after the trial, on the anniversary of Emma's death, Mara stood at a memorial she'd built on the property, a simple stone with Emma's name and dates. Around it, a garden full of wildflowers that Emma had loved. She'd brought a drawing, one of Emma's horse pictures that had somehow survived in a neighbor's possession, and she placed it carefully at the base of the stone. "I didn't get you justice," she said quietly. "Not the kind I wanted. Morrison's still free, still rich, still destroying families, and I hate that. I'll always hate that." She touched the stone. "But I got you something else. A place where kids like you will be safe, where families will have a chance to rebuild, where your name means hope instead of just tragedy. I hope that's enough. I hope you'd be proud." The wind picked up, moving through the wildflowers. Mara stayed there a while longer, talking to her daughter about everything that had happened, about Rowan and the life they were building, about the families they'd helped, about the fact that she could wake up now without the crushing weight of grief making it impossible to breathe. It still hurt. It always would. But the hurt was different now. Not consuming, just present. A permanent ache that she'd learned to carry instead of being buried by. When she walked back to the main house, Rowan was on the porch with a family who'd arrived that morning. 2 parents and a teenage son, all of them looking lost and scared and like they couldn't believe they'd landed somewhere safe. He was talking to them in that quiet way he had, not promising everything would be okay, just promising they had a place to figure out their next steps. Mara watched for a moment. Then she went inside to start dinner. They had 8 families staying now, more coming next week. The main hall would be full of people who'd lost everything and were slowly, painfully, finding new paths forward. That night, after everyone had eaten and scattered to their cabins, Mara and Rowan sat on the porch watching the sunset. They did this most evenings now, a quiet moment before the work started again the next day. "You ever think about going back?" Mara asked. "To your old life? Before the mountains? Before all this?" "Sometimes, but I don't want it anymore." Rowan looked at her. "That version of me was running, hiding, thought isolation would fix guilt." He shook his head. "Didn't work. Took being buried alive and dragged across the mountains to figure out the only way through is forward." "Forward's harder." "Yeah, but it's worth it." He gestured at the property. The cabins, the garden, the memorial. "This is worth it. Helping people is worth it. Being here with you is worth it." Mara felt something in her chest loosen, something that had been clenched tight for 5 years. She reached over, took his hand. He squeezed back. They sat like that, watching the light fade, listening to the sounds of the property settling for the night. Somewhere a child laughed. Somewhere a door closed. Somewhere people who'd thought their stories were over were discovering they had new chapters to write. Morrison had taken everything from Mara, her family, her home, her peace. But he hadn't taken her ability to choose what came next. Hadn't taken her strength. Hadn't taken her refusal to let destruction be the final word. She'd lost the trial, lost the chance to watch Morrison pay for his crimes. But she'd won something else, something Morrison could never touch. She'd proven that survival was its own kind of victory, that building from ashes was possible, that love and loss could coexist without destroying each other. The settlement money wouldn't last forever. The work would be hard. There would be setbacks and failures and days when the weight of it all felt too heavy. But there would also be mornings, sunrises that nobody had ruined yet, families finding their footing, children learning to laugh again, hope built brick by brick from the wreckage of despair. And through it all, she wouldn't be alone. Rowan would be there, the staff would be there, the families would be there, all of them broken in different ways, all of them choosing to keep going anyway. That was the real ending, not a courtroom verdict or a villain's downfall, just people who'd survived the unsurvivable deciding that surviving wasn't enough, that living mattered, that building mattered, that refusing to let trauma define you was its own kind of justice. Mara looked out at the property she'd built from nothing, at the life she'd created from the ashes of everything Morrison had burned, at the future she'd claimed despite everything that had tried to break her. "Thank you," she said quietly. Rowan looked at her. "For what?" "For being here. For staying. For helping me remember that giving up isn't the only option." "You never needed me for that. You've been fighting since before I showed up." "Maybe. But fighting's easier when you're not alone." She squeezed his hand. "We make a good team." "Yeah, we do." The stars came out one by one. The mountain loomed in the distance, dark against the darkening sky. Somewhere up there was the ridge where Rowan had been buried, the cabin where Mara had spent 5 years hiding, the paths they'd walked through hell to get here. They'd survived. Not just the avalanche or the fire or the winter mountains. They'd survived losing everything and discovering that everything could be rebuilt. Differently, better, stronger. Morrison had meant to destroy them both. Instead, he'd created something he'd never understand. 2 people who'd been broken and had refused to stay that way. Who'd found each other in the wreckage and decided that life after loss was still worth living. That was the victory. Small, personal, imperfect, but real. And for 2 people who'd spent so long in the dark, real was more than enough.